Between 1720 and 1751, Londoners were knocking back an astonishing 7 million gallons of gin every year, the equivalent of 2 pints weekly for every man, woman and child in the city. The streets were filled with addiction, poverty and death, but for those who made and sold this deadly spirit, business was booming. Here's what life was really like in the gin-crazed Georgian era. So yeah, if these stories work for you, subscribe. And I'm curious, what time is it where you are? Comment below. Last week, someone from Canada said they listened during lunch breaks. Not judging, just wasn't expecting that. Okay, tonight it's the Georgian gin craze. But before we go anywhere, get cozy. Like, actually cozy. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes crack open in the darkness. The smell hits you first, a mix of human waste, rotting food, and something sour you can't quite place. Welcome to London 1735. You're Elizabeth Bowman, and that wet spot on your thin straw mattress is probably from the leaking roof above your rented room. Christ alive, my head, you mutter, your tongue feeling like it's been wrapped in wool. That's what happens when you drink gin until you can't stand anymore. But who could blame you? Your throat still burns from yesterday's batch. Dawn barely filters through the grimy window. The single room you rent for 6 shillings a week is tiny, about the size of a modern bathroom. A cracked chamber pot sits in the corner, already half full from the night before. You'll empty it out the window later, like everyone else. You roll onto your side, every muscle protesting. Unlike your comfortable bed right now, this lumpy mattress might as well be filled with rocks. No wonder your back always hurts, but you can't lie in, not when there's gin to make. See? That's your business. The whole of London is in the grip of the gin craze, and you're one of thousands of small-time gin makers trying to cash in. It's the only way you've found to survive since your husband died of smallpox 3 years ago, leaving you with nothing but debts. I should explain something about gin in 1730s London. It's nothing like the artisanal stuff you might sip on a Friday night. You're probably thinking, but gin's made from juniper berries, right? Well, technically yes, but here's the fun part. You haven't seen a real juniper berry in months. My secret ingredient? You'd tell your customers with a wink. Pure English ingenuity. That's a nice way of saying you flavour your homemade spirit with turpentine to get that piney taste. When juniper's too expensive, you do what you have to do. And you're far from the only one. Most gin sellers are doing the same, adding everything from sulfuric acid to lime oil to give their product some kick. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, wincing as your bare feet touch the cold, damp floorboards. Your single room is on the 3rd floor of a crumbling tenement in St Giles, one of London's most notorious slums. The building groans around you, packed with families and individuals, all trying to scrape by. Through the thin walls, you can hear your neighbour Mrs. Cooper already coughing up her lungs. Consumption, probably. She won't last the winter. You make a mental note to check on her later. Maybe bring her a nip of the good stuff, the batch you actually made with real juniper. Just need to get moving, you tell yourself, rubbing your temples. Getting dressed is simple enough. You sleep in most of your clothes anyway. It's too cold not to. You pull on a threadbare dress, once blue but now an indeterminate grey from years of wear and infrequent washing. The smell of your own body is something you've grown used to. In a city of 700,000 people crammed together without proper sewage, everyone stinks. Your fingers instinctively check for the small knife you keep in your pocket. A woman alone needs protection, especially in your line of work. The streets of Georgian London aren't kind to anyone, but they're particularly harsh for women trying to make their own way. Elizabeth, you awake in there? A pounding on your door makes you jump. Coming, Jack, you call back, recognizing the voice of your supplier. You open the door to find Jack Ran, a wiry man with a perpetual grin despite his missing front teeth. He's younger than you by nearly a decade, but already one of the more successful spirit smugglers in the area. He didn't get the nickname 16-string Jack for nothing. The man is known for his flashy clothes, each leg of his breeches tied with 8 silver strings. "Got your delivery," he whispers, pushing past you into the room. From under his coat, he produces a large jug of raw spirit, fresh from the still this morning. Careful, it'll burn the hairs off a dog. You take the jug, testing its weight. "How much?" "2 shillings. "Same as always," Jack says, his eyes darting around your room. "Though prices might go up soon. The magistrates are cracking down again." That's the thing about Georgian London. The authorities are constantly at war with gin sellers. One year they relax the laws to please the landowners who grow the grain. The next they're hanging people for selling gin without a license. "You heard about Judith Dufour?" Jack asks, lowering his voice. You nod grimly. Everyone in the gin trade has heard the story. A woman so desperate for gin money that she took her 2-year-old from the workhouse, strangled it, and sold its new clothes for gin money. She was hanged at Tyburn last year. The story made you sick, but it also scared you. Not because you'd ever do something so horrible, but because it showed how easily the authorities would make an example of women in the gin trade. Well, they're using that to push for new laws, Jack continues. Bishop Wilson's on a crusade, says we're creating a drunken, ungovernable set of people, like they weren't ungovernable before gin, you mutter, handing over the coins. Jack pockets the money with a flourish. "Just be careful where you sell today. The constables are out in force around Covent Garden." After he leaves, you look at the jug with a mix of dread and anticipation. This raw spirit is the base of your business, but it's dangerous stuff, sometimes containing up to 80% alcohol. People have gone blind from badly made batches. You grab a smaller jug and carefully pour some of the clear liquid into it. Now comes the part that requires skill, turning this raw spirit into something people will pay good money for. From a small wooden box under your bed, you pull out your supplies, a small bottle of oil of turpentine for that juniper flavour, a bit of alum for bitterness, some lime oil for zest, and if you're feeling particularly bold, a tiny amount of sulfuric acid, what the trade calls oil of vitriol, to restore. The smell makes your eyes water as you mix your concoction, but you've been doing this long enough that you know exactly how much of each ingredient to add. Too much turpentine and customers get sick immediately. Too much vitriol and they might not wake up at all. "Perfect," you mutter, taking a small sip to test your work. The liquid burns down your throat, but the flavour is right. Strong enough to make people forget their troubles, flavoured enough to disguise the raw alcohol. You pour your creation into several small bottles, easy to hide in your pockets and under your skirts. The gin tax of 1736 made it illegal to sell gin without a $50 licence, an impossible sum for someone like you, so like thousands of others, you've gone underground. The clock strikes 6 and you know it's time to head out. The early morning is when workers are looking for something to warm them before a day of hard labour. The gin you sell isn't just a luxury. For many, it's breakfast, lunch and dinner. You tuck the bottles carefully into various hidden pockets in your clothes. If a constable searches you, you'll claim their medicine. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Outside, London is already awake and roaring. The narrow streets of St Giles teem with humanity, children with dirty faces running barefoot through puddles that might be water or might be something worse, costermongers pushing carts full of dubious vegetables, apprentices hurrying to their masters' shops. And everywhere, the signs of the gin epidemic. A man passed out in the gutter, snoring in his own filth. A woman with a baby at her breast, her eyes vacant as she sips from a small bottle. Children with the pinched, hungry looks of those whose parents spend food money on spirits. You turn away from these sights. You've learned to harden your heart. It's not your fault that life is so miserable that people will do anything for a few hours of oblivion. Your first stop is always the same, a small bakery where the workers start before dawn. The heat from the ovens hits you as you slip in through the back door. "Morning, Elizabeth," the head baker nods at you, already sweating in the oppressive heat. "The usual?" You slip him a bottle and he passes you a halfpenny and a small loaf of bread. It's still warm and your stomach growls at the smell. You haven't eaten since yesterday noon. "Any trouble with the constables?" you ask, breaking off a piece of the bread. The baker shrugs. "They were around yesterday, but they're easy enough to pay off. It's the informers you need to worry about." He's right. The 1736 Gin Act offered a $5 reward to anyone who informed on illegal gin sellers. It turned neighbour against neighbour, created a network of spies and liars who'd say anything for that kind of money. "I know how to spot an informer," you say with more confidence than you feel. By mid-morning, you've sold half your bottles and your pockets jingle with coins. It's not much, a few pennies and half-pennies, but it's enough to live on, more than you'd make as a washerwoman or a street sweeper, the usual jobs available to women of your class. You make your way toward Covent Garden despite Jack's warning. The market there is always busy, and busy means customers. The trick is to be subtle, to know who to approach and who to avoid. The garden square is crowded, as usual. Fruit and vegetable sellers shout their wares. Ladies in fine dresses pick their way through the crowd, servants trailing behind them. And in the shadows of the pillared market building, people like you conduct business in whispers and nods. "Gin?" you murmur to a haggard-looking woman balancing a basket of laundry on her hip. Her eyes light up. "How much?" "Penny a glass," you say, "or tuppence for a larger one." Money changes hands, and you pour a measure of gin into a small cup you carry for the purpose. The woman drinks it in one gulp, closes her eyes for a moment, then hands the cup back. "Another," she says, already digging for more coins. You're about to pour when a hand clamps down on your shoulder. Your heart stops. "What have we here?" a gruff voice asks. "Selling Geneva without a license, are we?" You turn to face a red-faced constable, his grip tightening on your shoulder. Behind him stands a smirking man you recognize from around the neighborhood, an informer, clearly. "It's medicine, sir," you stammer, "for my cough." "Save it," the constable growls. "You'll have a chance to explain yourself to the magistrate." The woman with the laundry has already melted into the crowd. No witnesses to help you. That's how it goes in the gin trade. Every seller for themselves. As the constable starts to drag you away, panic rises in your throat. A conviction could mean months in a house of correction, hard labour breaking rocks or picking oakum until your fingers bleed. You've heard the stories. Women who went in healthy and came out broken, if they came out at all. In desperation, you reach into your pocket, not for your knife, but for your purse. "Perhaps we could come to an arrangement," you suggest quietly, pressing a few coins into the constable's hand. He hesitates, then looks around to make sure no one is watching. "This once," he mutters, pocketing the money, "but I see you around here again. It's the house of correction for you." You nod gratefully and back away, heart still pounding. That was too close. You've lost a day's earnings to the bribe, but at least you're still free. As you make your way back to St. Giles, the city seems more oppressive than ever. The gin trade has made London a place of contradictions, incredible wealth alongside desperate poverty, moral crusaders fighting against desperate people just trying to escape their misery for a few hours. The sun is setting by the time you reach your lodgings, casting long shadows between the buildings. You climb the creaking stairs, exhausted and hungry, but grateful to have avoided disaster. In your tiny room, you collapse onto your bed, the straw mattress rustling beneath you. The remaining bottles of gin are lined up on your windowsill, catching the last light of day. Tomorrow, you'll try again, in a different area with different customers. That's life in the gin-crazed Georgian era, a constant dance between making enough to survive and avoiding the authorities who would see you imprisoned for the crime of trying to live. Your fingers play with a loose thread on your dress as you stare at the ceiling, wondering how long you can keep this up. A shout from the street draws you to the window. Below, a crowd has gathered around a man who's collapsed in the gutter, foam at his lips. Bad gin, probably. The kind cut with too much vitriol or worse. You've seen it before, and you'll see it again. At least mine won't kill them, you whisper to yourself. It's the small comfort you cling to in this world where survival means walking a moral tightrope every day. As darkness falls completely, you reach for one of your own bottles, just a small sip to help you sleep. In the morning, you'll start again, mixing your concoctions, hiding from constables, selling oblivion penny by penny to those as desperate as yourself. This is your London, this is the gin craze, and like the city itself, it will consume you if you let it. The next morning arrives with the sound of church bells and shouting in the street below. You're already awake, though. Sleep never comes easy when your stomach's empty and your room feels like an icebox. Another day in the life of Elizabeth Bowman, gin seller of St Giles. Your near miss with the constable yesterday means you need to be more careful, maybe try a different approach. The gin trade has gotten more dangerous since Parliament passed that damn 1736 Gin Act, but the people demanding your product haven't gone anywhere. Just need to be smarter about it, you mutter, splashing some water from your chipped basin onto your face. The water's freezing, but it helps clear your head. You've got about half a jug of raw spirit left from Jack's delivery. Not enough to make a full day's worth of sales, but enough to try something different. Today, you're thinking of setting up a Puss and Mew. What's a Puss and Mew? It's the cleverest way to sell gin that London's underground dealers have come up with yet. Picture this, a wooden wall with a small slot in it, and on the wall is a metal cat figure. Yeah, an actual cat. Customers walk up, put a coin in the slot and say, Puss. Then, from inside, the seller, that would be you, says, Mew, and pours gin through a pipe that comes out under the cat's paw or mouth. The customer catches it in a cup, downs it, and goes on their way. No face-to-face contact, no getting caught red-handed by constables. You've seen them popping up across London, and you know just the place to set one up. The abandoned tailor's shop on the corner. The owner died of fever last month, and no one's claimed it yet. But first, breakfast. You fish under your bed and pull out the heel of yesterday's bread. It's hard as a rock now, but if you dip it in water, you can just about chew it. This is what passes for breakfast for most Londoners in your position. The rich might wake up to eggs, bacon and coffee. You get stale bread if you're lucky. Could be worse, you remind yourself. Could be in the workhouse. The workhouse is every poor Londoner's nightmare, a prison in all but name where the destitute are sent to labour endlessly breaking rocks, picking oakum or grinding bones. The food is worse than what you're eating now, and the conditions make your tiny room look like a palace. You've managed to stay out so far, but it's always there, waiting for those who fall too far. You pull on your coat, the same one you've had for 5 years, patched so many times it's more patch than original cloth, and head out into the London morning. The smell hits you like a wall as soon as you open your door. London in 1735 is probably the stinkiest place on earth. No proper sewage system means waste just flows through open gutters in the streets. Add to that the smoke from thousands of coal fires, the stench of the meat markets and tanneries, and the general unwashed masses, and you've got a smell that would knock you flat if you weren't used to it. You descend the rickety stairs of your tenement, nodding to Mrs. Cooper, who's sitting on the bottom step, her breath coming in wheezing gasps. "Morning, Lizzie," she manages between coughs. "Got any of your medicine?" That's what a lot of people call gin, medicine, and to be fair, in a city where the water can kill you and the cold seeps into your bones, it does serve a kind of medicinal purpose. It dulls pain, both physical and the deeper kind that comes from living in squalor with no hope of escape. You glance around to make sure no one's watching, then pull out a small bottle. "Here," you say, pressing it into her hand. "Just a little to ease the cough." She doesn't offer to pay, and you don't ask. There's an understanding among the desperate. You help when you can, because tomorrow it might be you needing help. The streets of St. Giles are already busy, though it's barely past dawn. Children as young as 5 or 6 run errands or beg. Men trudge to whatever labour they can find, the lucky ones to regular jobs in workshops or markets, the unlucky to stand on street corners hoping someone needs a strong back for the day. You make your way to the abandoned tailor's shop, a small bundle under your arm containing the things you'll need. The place is dusty and smells of mildew, but the front window facing the street is perfect for what you have in mind. Setting up a Puss and Mew isn't complicated. You've brought a piece of wood to block most of the window, leaving just a slot at the bottom. From an old pewter dish, you've fashioned a crude cat face that you nail above the slot. "Meow," you practice, giggling despite yourself. Sometimes you have to find humour where you can. Inside, you set up a small table with your bottles of gin and a funnel attached to a long, thin tube that you run out to the cat's mouth. It's not pretty, but it should work. Now, all you need are customers. You don't have to wait long. A group of labourers passes by on their way to work, and one notices your setup. He nudges his friends and approaches, a penny already in his hand. "Puss?" he calls, dropping the coin through the slot. "Mew," you respond, and pour a measure of gin down your funnel. The man catches the liquid in his cupped hands. He doesn't have a cup, and slurps it up, wiping his mouth with his sleeve afterward. "Good morning, medicine," he says with a grin, revealing several missing teeth. His friends soon follow suit, and before you know it, you've made 6pence in sales. Not bad for your first hour. The morning passes quickly, with a steady stream of customers. You're careful, always checking for constables before responding to a puss with your mew. By midday, you've sold most of your stock and have a pocket full of pennies and halfpennies. You're just considering closing up and heading to the market to buy some real food for once, when you hear a commotion outside. Peering through a crack in your wooden screen, you see a crowd gathering around a well-dressed man on horseback. "Hear ye," the man calls out, unrolling a scroll. "By order of His Majesty's government, a new proclamation regarding the sale and consumption of spirituous liquors." Your stomach drops. Another law? They're always changing the rules, always finding new ways to crack down on the gin trade while still allowing the rich to drink whatever they want. The sale of gin without proper licence is hereby punishable by imprisonment and public whipping, the man continues, and any person informing on such illegal sales shall receive a reward of £5. £5. That's more than most people in this neighbourhood see in months. It's enough to tempt even the most loyal friend to turn informer. You suddenly feel very exposed in your makeshift gin shop. The announcement continues, but you're no longer listening. You need to pack up and get out before someone decides £5 is worth more than their next drink. Hastily, you dismantle your Puss and Mew, stuffing the parts into your bundle. You'll have to leave the wooden screen, but that doesn't have your name on it. You're about to slip out the back when the door to the shop creaks open. Your heart nearly stops, but instead of a constable, it's Jack Rann, your supplier, looking uncharacteristically worried. "Elizabeth," he whispers urgently, "you need to come with me, now." "What's happening?" you ask, clutching your bundle to your chest. "They've arrested Molly Harris. Someone informed on her gin cellar down on Drury Lane. They're saying she's going to hang." Molly Harris. You know her. Not well, but enough to have shared a drink once or twice. She ran one of the bigger gin operations in the area, a cellar where people could come and drink on the premises, a step up from your street selling. "Hang?" you repeat, disbelieving. "For selling gin." Jack's face is grim. "For selling adulterated spirits that killed 3 men. They're saying she put too much vitriol in her mix." The blood drains from your face. You've been careful with your own concoctions, but who's to say what's too much? There are no recipes, no regulations. Everyone makes gin their own way, with whatever they can get their hands on. "Come on," Jack says, tugging at your arm. "There's a meeting. People like us. We need to figure out what to do." You follow him out the back door and through a maze of narrow alleys. Jack moves with the confidence of someone who knows every back street and hidden passage in London. It's how he stayed ahead of the law so far. He leads you to a cellar beneath a respectable-looking coffee house near Covent Garden. The contrast is striking. Upstairs, gentlemen in fine clothes debate philosophy and politics over expensive imported coffee. Down here, in the dank basement, the cellar is crowded and lit by a few sputtering candles. The air is thick with tobacco smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. You recognise many faces, fellow gin sellers from various neighbourhoods, a few dealers in stolen goods, some women who work the streets. "Listen up," a large man with a scar running down his face calls out. You know him as Big Tom, though you've never learned his real name. He's a former soldier who now runs one of the most successful gin shops in 7 Dials. "We've got a problem. The magistrates are cracking down harder than ever. Molly Harris is facing the noose, and word is they're looking to make more examples." A murmur runs through the crowd. Making an example of someone means a public hanging at Tyburn, with crowds gathering to watch the spectacle. Hangings are like holidays in London. Shops close, people bring picnics, children are hoisted on shoulders for a better view. "What are we supposed to do?" a woman's voice calls out. "This is how we eat. How we live." "We need to be smarter," Big Tom says. "More careful about who we sell to. No more selling to strangers. And for God's sake, be careful with your mixtures. We can't have more people dying from bad gin." That's the thing about the gin trade. It's built on a foundation of desperation. The customers are desperate for escape, and the sellers are desperate for income. Quality control isn't exactly a priority. "I've heard they're changing the law again," someone else chimes in, "making licenses cheaper so more legal gin shops can open. And how's that help us?" a voice challenges. "We still can't afford a license, even if they cut the price in half." The discussion goes back and forth with various suggestions thrown out. Go underground completely, move operations to different neighbourhoods, bribe more constables, but no one has a real solution. As the meeting breaks up, you find yourself standing next to a woman you've seen around but never spoken to. She's older than you, with deep lines etched into her face and hands gnarled from hard work. "First time at one of these?" she asks, offering you a pull from a small flask. You nod, accepting the flask and taking a small sip. It's gin, but better than what you make. smoother, with a real juniper flavour. "I'm Elizabeth," you say, handing the flask back. "Anne," she replies, "been selling gin for 15 years now, started back when it was still legal for anyone to distill." "How do you stay out of trouble?" you ask, genuinely curious. 15 years is a long time to avoid the constables. Anne gives you a knowing look. "I found a better way. Come with me. I'll show you." Curious, you follow Anne out of the cellar and back into the streets. She leads you through the market at Covent Garden and down a side street to a respectable-looking house. Not fancy, but not a slum either. "This is yours?" you ask, surprised. Anne nods, a hint of pride in her expression. "Rented, but yes, all from gin money." She takes you inside, and you're immediately struck by how clean it is. There's actual furniture, a table, chairs, even a small bookshelf. This is luxury compared to your single room. "Sit," Anne gestures to a chair. "Let me explain how I stay alive in this business." You sit, still taking in the relative opulence around you. "I'm listening." Anne bustles around, lighting a small fire in the grate and putting on a kettle. The mistake most sellers make is selling to anyone with a penny. That's how you get caught. "I only sell to people I know, regular customers who come to me by word of mouth." "But how do you make enough that way?" you ask. "Volume is how most sellers survive. A penny here, a penny there, all day long." Anne smiles, revealing surprisingly good teeth for someone her age. "Because I charge more. My gin is better. Real juniper, no vitriol, no turpentine, and I sell it as a luxury, not as cheap escape." She points to a row of small bottles on her shelf, each with a handwritten label. "Mrs. Anne's Cordial Water, restorative tonic for ladies, healthful spirit of juniper." You market it as medicine, you realise. "Exactly," Anne nods. "And I only sell to women, respectable women who wouldn't be seen in a dram shop but still want their daily gin. Widows, wives of tradesmen, even a few merchants' ladies. They pay 3 or 4 times what your street customers pay, and they never inform on me because they'd have to admit they're buying gin themselves." It's genius, really. Find a niche within the gin market where the customers have money and a reason to keep quiet. "How did you start?" you ask, as Anne pours hot water into cups and adds a splash of gin to each. Anne's face darkens slightly. "Like most, out of necessity. My husband was a journeyman printer. Good man, good trade. Then the gin got him. Started drinking more and more, couldn't work. Eventually drank himself to death, leaving me with 3 children and no income." She passes you a cup. The gin-laced tea is warming and soothing. "I started selling what killed him," she continues with bitter irony. "Figured I might as well profit from the devil I knew, but I swore I'd never sell the kind of rotgut that took my James. My gin is clean as I can make it." You sip your drink thoughtfully. "Could you teach me? How to make better gin, I mean?" Anne studies you for a moment, then nods slowly. "I could use some help with deliveries. Getting older now, and my knees aren't what they used to be. You seem smart enough to learn, but you'd have to stop using turpentine and that other poison." "Agreed," you say quickly. The prospect of making a decent living without constantly looking over your shoulder for constables is too good to pass up. "First lesson," Anne says, settling into her chair. "Real gin starts with good spirit, not that raw stuff your friend Jack probably sells you. You need to redistill it, clean it up." She points to a small copper pot in the corner of the room, with tubes running from it into a bucket of water, then into a collection vessel. "That's a proper still?" you ask. You've heard of them, but never seen one up close. "Small one? Yes, technically illegal without a license, but easier to hide than those big operations in the gin cellars. I run the raw spirit through it twice before I even think about adding juniper. The concept of taking such care with gin production is foreign to you." In your world, it's all about making it as quickly and cheaply as possible, then selling it before you get caught. And the juniper, you ask? It's expensive. It is, Anne agrees, but worth it. I buy it from an apothecary I know, add it to the spirit with some coriander seed, angelica root, and a bit of dried lemon peel. Let it steep for a day, then distill again. That's proper gin. She makes it sound so simple, yet you know it represents a completely different approach to the trade, an investment in quality rather than just chasing quick pennies. Why are you telling me all this? You ask suddenly. Why help me? Anne is quiet for a moment, staring into her cup. I see myself in you, she finally says. 20 years ago, that was me, desperate, alone, doing what I had to do to survive. If someone had shown me a better way then, maybe I wouldn't have these. She holds up her hands, showing you the burn scars from years of working with hot stills and caustic ingredients. Besides, she adds with a small smile, like I said, I need help with deliveries. My customers are scattered across the better parts of town, and these old legs can't walk as far as they used to. Just as you're about to respond, there's a sharp knock at the door. Anne freezes, her eyes widening in alarm. Were you followed? She whispers. I don't think so, you reply, but uncertainty creeps into your voice. You were careful, but with Jack leading the way through unfamiliar streets, who knows? Anne motions for you to be silent and moves to a small window, peering out cautiously. Her shoulders relax. It's all right, she says. It's just Mrs. Winthrop for her weekly bottle. She opens the door to reveal a well-dressed, middle-aged woman who looks nervously up and down the street before slipping inside. Mrs. Anne, the woman says, breathless. I came as quickly as I could. Have you heard? They've arrested another gin seller. They say she'll hang. I've heard, Mrs. Winthrop, Anne says soothingly. But you needn't worry about me. I'm very careful. Mrs. Winthrop notices you for the first time and eyes you suspiciously. Who is this? My niece, Elizabeth, Anne lies smoothly. Just arrived from the country to help me with my rheumatism. Elizabeth, this is Mrs. Winthrop, one of my most valued customers. You curtsy awkwardly, trying to look like someone's country niece rather than a St. Giles gin seller. Mrs. Winthrop doesn't look entirely convinced, but is too distracted by her need for gin to press the issue. Do you have my tonic ready? My nerves have been terrible this week. Mr. Winthrop has been most difficult about household expenses. Anne retrieves a small, elegantly labelled bottle from her cabinet and hands it to Mrs. Winthrop, who in turn passes over what looks like a considerable sum of money. Remember, just a small glass in the morning and another before bed, Anne instructs, as if prescribing actual medicine. Too much will inflame rather than calm the nerves. Mrs. Winthrop nods earnestly, tucks the bottle into her muff, and with another nervous glance outside, slips back out the door. And that, Anne says after she's gone, is how it's done. She pays me $1 for that small bottle. More than you make selling to 20 labourers, I'd wager. She's right, and the revelation is both exciting and infuriating. While you've been risking your life selling penny glasses of gin cut with turpentine, Anne has built a comfortable life selling tonic to middle-class women at premium prices. It's not fair, is it? Anne says, reading your expression. The rich drink their wine and brandy without anyone batting an eye. The middling sort have their tonics and cordials, but let the poor try to forget their misery for a few hours with gin, and suddenly it's a moral crisis that requires hanging people. That's the hypocrisy of Georgian London in a nutshell. The gin craze is only a crisis when it affects the poor, who are expected to remain sober enough to work themselves to death for starvation wages. So, Anne continues, leaning forward in her chair, are you interested in learning my way? It's still risky. The law doesn't care if you're selling to labourers or merchants' wives, but it's a sight better than what you're doing now. You think about your tiny room in St. Giles, the constant fear of arrest, the grinding poverty. Then you look around Anne's modest but comfortable home at the steady stream of respectable customers willing to pay good money for quality gin disguised as medicine. Yes, you say firmly, teach me. Anne smiles, and for the first time since your husband died, you feel a flicker of real hope. Not just for survival, but for something better, a way to navigate the perilous waters of Georgian London's gin-soaked economy without drowning. As the afternoon light begins to fade, Anne shows you her still in more detail, explaining how to clean the raw spirit, how to measure the botanicals properly, how to test the product for safety without risking blindness or worse. It's a different world from the crude mixing you've been doing in your room, more science than desperation. And as you absorb Anne's lessons, you realise that there's a kind of dignity in doing something well, even if that something is making illegal gin. One more thing, Anne says as you prepare to leave. If you're going to work with me, you'll need to move. St. Giles is no place for someone selling to the kind of customers I have. They'd never believe you came from there. The prospect of leaving your neighbourhood is both terrifying and thrilling. St. Giles may be a slum, but it's familiar. It's where you've survived since your husband died. I don't know if I can afford better lodgings, you admit. You can stay here until you get on your feet, Anne offers. I have a small room upstairs that my daughter used before she married. It's yours if you want it. The kindness nearly brings tears to your eyes. In a city as harsh as London, genuine generosity is rare. Thank you, you manage to say. I'll get my things tomorrow. As you step back out into the London evening, the city somehow looks different. Still dirty, still dangerous, still divided by vast gulfs of wealth and privilege. But now you can see a path forward, a way to navigate its perils with a bit more security. The gin craze that has gripped London might be a catastrophe for many, a slow death by poisoned spirit or a quick one at the end of a hangman's rope. But for you, Elizabeth Bowman, it might just be salvation. The next morning finds you back in St. Giles, stuffing your few belongings into a tattered cloth sack. There's not much to pack. A spare dress even more threadbare than the one you're wearing, a comb missing half its teeth, a small knife, and a locket with a snippet of your husband's hair. Everything you own fits into a bundle you can carry under one arm. Mrs. Cooper wheezes her way up the stairs as you're leaving, leaning heavily on the railing. "So it's true then," she says between laboured breaths. "You're leaving us." News travels fast in tenements like these. Everyone knows everyone's business, partly from nosiness and partly as a survival strategy. Knowing which neighbours you can trust can mean the difference between starving and scraping by. "Got an opportunity," you tell her vaguely. "Better lodgings, maybe steady work." You don't mention Anne or the gin business. The fewer people who know, the better. Mrs. Cooper nods, understanding the unspoken. "Good for you, Lizzie, though we'll miss your medicine." She winks, and you both know she means your gin. You press your last small bottle into her hand. "For your cough." "God bless you," she says, pocketing it. "Watch yourself out there. Different neighbourhoods have different dangers." You know she's right. St. Giles may be a slum, but it's a known quantity. You understand its rhythms, its threats, its unwritten rules. Moving to a more respectable area means learning a whole new set of social codes. Your landlord, a greasy-haired man who's always smelled faintly of onions, doesn't seem surprised when you tell him you're leaving. He just holds out his hand for the key, already thinking about how quickly he can rent your room to someone else. There's never a shortage of desperate people in London. "Owe me for the rest of the month," he grunts. "The roof leaks and there are rats in the walls," you counter. "Consider us even." He looks like he might argue, but apparently decides it's not worth the effort. Instead, he just spits on the floor and walks away, a gentleman to the end. With one last look at the dingy room that's been your home for the past 3 years, you close the door and head downstairs. You're not sentimental about the place. It's been shelter, nothing more, but there's still a strange feeling in your stomach as you step out onto the street. This is a change, a risk. And in your experience, change usually means trouble. But not this time, you tell yourself firmly. This time, change means opportunity. The walk to Anne's house takes nearly an hour, partly because you're carrying your bundle and partly because you're careful to take a roundabout route. Old habits die hard, and you still check over your shoulder for constables or informers. Anne welcomes you with a cup of tea, real tea, not the weak, twice-brewed dregs you're used to. The little luxuries in her home continue to surprise you. A china cup, a cushioned chair, windows that actually keep out the draft. "I've cleared out the upstairs room," she says, showing you to a small but clean chamber with an actual bed, not just a straw mattress on the floor. "It's not much, but it's yours for now. It's more than I've had in years," you admit, setting down your meagre bundle. Anne looks at your belongings with a critical eye. "We'll need to get you some new clothes. You can't meet my customers looking like you just crawled out of St. Giles." You glance down at your dress, seeing it suddenly through Anne's eyes, patched, stained, clearly marking you as someone from the poorest part of the city. "I can't afford," you begin, but Anne waves away your protest. "Consider it an investment in our business," she says. "Besides, I have some of my daughter's old things that might fit you with a bit of alteration." The idea of wearing clothes that aren't threadbare makes you feel both excited and uncomfortable. In St. Giles, looking too prosperous can make you a target, but here, in a respectable neighbourhood, looking poor marks you as suspicious. You spend the morning learning the basics of Anne's still, how to check the temperature, how to ensure the coil is properly cooled, how to collect the distilled spirit without wasting a drop. It's more complicated than your old method of just mixing raw spirit with flavourings, but you can already tell the result is far superior. "The trick," Anne explains, "is patience. Good gin can't be rushed. That's why most sellers use shortcuts. Turpentine for flavour, vitriol for kick. They're trying to make as much as possible as quickly as possible, because they're one step ahead of the constables," you point out. Anne nods. "Exactly. But in our business model, quality matters more than quantity. Our customers pay for the good stuff, and they expect it to actually be good." By midday, you've helped Anne prepare a batch of her Ladies' Restorative Cordial, essentially a well-made gin flavoured with juniper, lemon peel, and a touch of honey to soften the burn. It's packaged in small, elegant bottles with handwritten labels that make it look like legitimate medicine. "Now," Anne says, "time for your first delivery." She hands you a basket with 6 bottles carefully nestled in straw. "These are for some of my regular customers, ladies who prefer not to be seen visiting what might be mistaken for a gin shop. You'll take them their weekly tonics and collect payment." She gives you precise directions to each house, along with specific instructions about each customer. "Mrs. Trentham likes to chat, but don't stay too long or you'll never finish your rounds. Mrs. Winthrop, whom you met yesterday, is always worried about being discovered, so be discreet. Miss Lamb lives with her brother who doesn't approve, so you must only deliver when he's at his counting house." It's a whole new world of gin selling, one where the customers are ashamed not because gin is associated with poverty and vice, but because ladies of quality aren't supposed to drink spirits at all. Tea, yes, wine occasionally, but gin is still seen as vulgar even when repackaged as medicine. Anne helps you dress in one of her daughter's old gowns, a simple brown dress but made of wool much finer than anything you've worn in years. It's a little loose in the bodice. Her daughter was apparently more generously endowed than you, but with strategic pinning, it looks respectable enough. "Remember," Anne says as she adjusts your collar, "you're my niece from the country, helping me with my business of medicinal cordials. You're respectable, but not too educated, polite, but not familiar. You practice a curtsy, feeling ridiculous, but understanding the necessity." In Georgian London, appearances and manners matter enormously. The wrong word, the wrong gesture could mark you as an imposter in this world of middle-class respectability. "How do I look?" you ask, smoothing down the unfamiliar fabric. Anne steps back, evaluating you with a critical eye. "You'll do, though try not to walk like you're expecting to be robbed at any moment. You hadn't realised your habitual wariness was so obvious. You consciously relax your shoulders and try to adopt a more confident posture." "Better," Anne nods. "Now off you go. And remember, these aren't gin customers. They're ladies purchasing health tonics." With the basket over your arm and directions memorised, you set out into a London that seems almost foreign. Just a few streets away from the familiar squalor of St Giles, the city transforms. The buildings are better maintained, the streets somewhat cleaner. There are fewer beggars, fewer drunks collapsed in doorways. The people dress better, walk with more confidence, look at you with less desperation in their eyes. Your first stop is a neat townhouse near Covent Garden, home to Mrs. Trentham, a merchant's widow who, according to Anne, drinks enough tonic to stun a horse but never appears visibly affected. You knock on the servant's entrance as instructed, and a maid with a sour expression answers. "Yes?" she asks, looking you up and down suspiciously. "Delivery from Mrs. Anne for Mrs. Trentham," you say, trying to sound like this is perfectly routine for you. The maid's expression changes from suspicion to understanding. "Oh, the tonic. Yes, madam is expecting it. This way." She leads you through a kitchen that smells wonderfully of baking bread, up a back staircase, and into a small sitting room where a plump, rosy-cheeked woman sits, embroidering by the window. "The tonic delivery, ma'am," the maid announces. Mrs. Trentham looks up, her face brightening. "Ah, excellent. But you're not Anne." "Her niece, ma'am," you say, dropping into the curtsy you practiced. "Elizabeth, my aunt's rheumatism is troubling her today, so I'm making the deliveries." "How lovely of you to help your aunt," Mrs. Trentham says, setting aside her embroidery. "Do sit down a moment. Tell me, how are you finding London? Anne mentioned you're from the country." And just like that, you're drawn into conversation with a woman from a world entirely different from your own. Mrs. Trentham chatters about people you've never heard of, social events you couldn't hope to attend, concerns that would never cross your mind in St Giles. Like whether the new fabric for her drawing room curtains should be blue damask or green silk. You navigate the conversation carefully, offering vague responses about London being very grand and so different from home. When she asks where exactly in the country you're from, you mention a small village near where your husband once told you he grew up. You know, just enough details to sound convincing. All the while, Mrs. Trentham sips tea that, judging from the faint smell wafting across the room, has been generously enhanced with gin from a previous delivery. After what feels like an eternity of small talk, you finally manage to extract yourself with the promise that Anne herself will visit next week. Mrs. Trentham presses payment into your hand, a sum that would have taken you days to earn selling penny glasses in St Giles. Your next deliveries follow a similar pattern, though not all customers are as chatty as Mrs. Trentham. Mrs. Winthrop, whom you met yesterday, barely opens her door wide enough to take the bottle and hand over coins, her eyes darting nervously up and down the street the entire time. Miss Lamb, a spinster living in her successful brother's home, meets you in the garden, quickly hiding the bottle in her sewing basket. "If Frederick knew," she whispers, though no one is within earshot, "he would be most displeased. He thinks my nerves are calmed by prayer and needlework." She gives a small, rebellious smile. Prayer and gin work much better. By late afternoon, your basket is empty of bottles but heavy with coins. You've made more money in one day than you might have seen in 2 weeks of your previous life. It's both exhilarating and unsettling. On your way back to Anne's, you pass through an area where the streets are lined with gin shops, not hidden operations like Anne's, but licensed establishments with proper signs. Since the disastrous Gin Act of 1736, which drove the trade underground, the government has been gradually adjusting its approach. The current laws still restrict gin sales, but the licenses are more affordable, allowing some sellers to operate legally. These legitimate gin shops are a world away from the back-alley operations and Puss and Mew setups of the poorest neighbourhoods. They have proper counters, glasses rather than crude cups, sometimes even seating, and their customers aren't just labourers seeking oblivion, but include tradesmen, clerks, even the occasional gentleman slumming it. Outside one such establishment, a crowd has gathered. At first, you think it might be a fight or an arrest, common enough sights in gin-soaked London, but as you draw closer, you realise it's something else entirely. A well-dressed man stands on a crate, addressing the crowd with passionate gestures. "The gin curse destroys our city," he proclaims. "It ruins families, breeds crime, and turns honest workers into drunkards and thieves." He's one of the moral reformers who've been gaining influence lately, men who see gin as the root of all London's social ills. Some are religious, like Bishop Wilson, who calls gin drinkers ungovernable. Others, like this speaker, approach it as a matter of public welfare and economic productivity. "Every penny spent on gin is a penny taken from the mouths of children," the man continues. "Every hour spent in drunken stupor is an hour stolen from honest labour." There's a murmur of both agreement and dissent from the crowd. A woman near you mutters, easy for him to say with his wine cellar and his coffee house memberships. She's right, of course. The moral panic about gin is deeply hypocritical. The wealthy drink just as much as the poor. They just do it with imported brandy and fine wines rather than cheap gin. No one is calling for restrictions on those. As if to underscore the point, a well-dressed gentleman emerges from the gin shop, slightly unsteady on his feet. He listens to the reformer's speech with an amused expression before calling out, "Perhaps, sir, you should preach temperance at the gentlemen's clubs of St. James's before condemning the simple pleasures of the working man." This draws cheers from part of the crowd and scowls from others. The class divisions of Georgian London are never far from the surface, and gin sits right on the fault line. The reformer tries to continue his speech, but the disruption has broken his momentum. As the crowd's attention fragments, you slip away, not wanting to be noticed. Back at Anne's house, you find her sorting herbs at her kitchen table, the room fragrant with juniper, coriander, and dried citrus peel. "Oh, successful day?" she asks, eyeing your lighter basket. "All delivered," you confirm, counting out the money, though I passed a man giving a speech against gin on my way back, called it a curse destroying the city. Anne snorts derisively. "There's one on every corner these days. Reformers. They call themselves. Most have never known a day of real hardship in their lives. They don't understand that for many, gin is the only comfort available." He said gin takes food from children's mouths, you recall. And what would those children eat if their mothers couldn't earn money selling it, Anne counters, or if their fathers couldn't dull the pain of breaking their bodies in the docks all day? It's easy to condemn when you've never had to choose between bad options. She has a point. In the brutal economy of Georgian London, gin is both problem and solution, a source of income for thousands like you and Anne, a brief escape for countless others, a health hazard for many, and a moral panic for the privileged classes who see only the negative consequences. Still, Anne continues more gently, that's why I try to make mine as clean and safe as possible. Too much of anything can be a poison, but bad gin is always a poison. She shows you how to test the strength of the spirit by lighting a small amount on fire. The colour and intensity of the flame indicate its alcohol content. Too weak and customers feel cheated. Too strong and it can do real harm, she explains. As evening falls, you help Anne prepare dinner. A simple stew, but with actual meat in it, a luxury you've rarely enjoyed in recent years. The warmth and relative comfort of her home still feels strange, almost undeserved. You'll get used to it, Anne says, noticing your hesitation as you sit down to eat at a proper table with a cloth. The first time I could afford a real dinner after years of near starvation, I almost couldn't eat it. Felt like it should go to someone who needed it more. How did you overcome that, you ask, breaking off a piece of bread, fresh bread, another rarity in your life? Anne smiles wryly. Realised I was that someone who needed it. Surviving isn't just about not dying, Elizabeth. Eventually, you have to allow yourself to live. After dinner, Anne teaches you more about her gin-making process, showing you how to filter the spirit through charcoal to remove impurities, how to measure botanicals precisely, how to test each batch for consistency. Tomorrow, she says, as you're cleaning the equipment, we'll visit my supplier. He's an apothecary in the city who sells me juniper and other botanicals, claims they're for perfume making. She winks. We all have our little fictions. That night, lying in a real bed for the first time in years, you find sleep elusive despite your exhaustion. Your mind keeps returning to the contrasts of the day, the desperate gin drinkers collapsed in St. Giles' doorways versus the respectable ladies sipping tonic in their comfortable homes. The hidden Puss and Mew operations versus the licensed gin shops. The moral condemnation from those who've never known true want. London in the grip of the gin craze is a city of contradictions, and you've now seen both sides of it, the ruinous effects on the poorest and the hypocritical consumption by the better off, and you're caught somewhere in the middle, no longer destitute but far from secure, selling a product that's both demonized and desired. As you finally drift towards sleep, one thought keeps returning. In this gin-soaked city, you're managing to stay afloat by learning to swim with the current rather than against it. And maybe, just maybe, you'll eventually reach safer shores. Morning comes with the unfamiliar sensation of being well rested. The quiet of Anne's neighbourhood is a stark contrast to the constant noise of St. Giles, where even at night there were always shouts, cries, the occasional scream. Anne is already up when you come downstairs, dressed in a neat gown with a clean apron. Good, you're awake, she says. We have deliveries this morning, then we'll visit Mr. Winters, my supplier. She hands you a cup of tea and a plate with bread and cheese. Another real breakfast. A luxury that still feels strange. Also, she adds, I've been thinking about your training. You need to learn the whole business, not just deliveries and basic distilling. What else is there, you ask, between bites? The accounts, for one thing, Anne says, knowing what we spend, what we earn, tracking who's paid and who owes, and cultivating customers, finding new ladies who need tonics without attracting the wrong kind of attention. It's becoming clear that Anne's operation is far more sophisticated than the hand-to-mouth selling you're used to. She's running a real business, albeit an illegal one, with all the planning and management that entails. After breakfast, you accompany Anne on her delivery rounds to customers on the other side of her neighbourhood. Unlike yesterday's clients, who were mostly middle-class merchants' wives and widows, today's are somewhat higher on the social ladder. The first stop is particularly intimidating, a large house near Bedford Square, home to Lady Jenkins, the widow of a minor knight. You've never been in the presence of nobility before, even the lower ranks, and your nervousness must show. "Relax," Anne whispers as a livid servant leads you up a back staircase. They put their stays on one lace at a time, just like everyone else, and they're often the ones most desperate for gin. All those social constraints make for thirsty women. Lady Jenkins proves this point. She receives you in her morning room, already looking flushed despite the early hour. The emptying of a tonic bottle on her side table suggests she's well into her daily consumption. "Anne, my saviour," she greets with slightly too much enthusiasm. "And who is this?" "My niece, Elizabeth, my lady," Anne replies with a respectful but not servile nod. "She's assisting me with my business." "Charming," Lady Jenkins says, barely glancing at you. Her attention is fixed on the basket Anne carries. "You've brought my monthly supply." "As requested, my lady, the special blend with extra lemon essence." Lady Jenkins's special blend is essentially a stronger version of the regular tonic, you'll later learn, closer to pure gin with less of the herbal disguise. She consumes more in a month than most of Anne's customers do in 3. As Anne counts out bottles, Lady Jenkins lowers her voice conspiratorially. "Have you heard about the Duchess of Marlborough? They say she takes laudanum with her gin now, claims it's for her nerves, but we all know better." Anne makes appropriate noises of shock while continuing to unpack bottles. The gossip flows freely, much of it centred on who among the upper classes is drinking what. It seems gin addiction reaches all levels of society, just hidden behind different facades depending on one's station. After collecting a substantial payment from Lady Jenkins, you and Anne continue your rounds. By midday, your basket is again empty of bottles and full of coins. "Now," Anne says, "to Mr. Winters, and remember, we're purchasing ingredients for ladies' perfumes and health cordials, nothing about gin." Mr. Winters's apothecary shop sits on a busy street in the city, the mercantile heart of London. The bell above the door tinkles as you enter, and you're immediately enveloped in a cloud of mingled scents, herbs, spices, chemicals, and something vaguely medicinal. The apothecary himself is a thin man with spectacles perched on a prominent nose. He looks up from grinding something in a mortar and smiles in recognition. "Mrs. Anne, a pleasure as always." His eyes shift to you with polite curiosity. "Mr. Winters, this is my niece, Elizabeth. She's learning the cordial business." "Ah, keeping it in the family. Very wise." He nods approvingly. "The usual supplies, I presume?" "Yes, though perhaps a bit more juniper this time. My ladies have been particularly fond of that fragrance lately." The transaction proceeds with this same careful language, never mentioning gin directly, though everyone knows exactly what the supplies are for. Mr. Winters weighs out juniper berries, coriander seeds, angelica root, and various other botanicals, packaging each in paper twists. As he works, he chats amiably about business and city gossip. "Did you hear they arrested Thomas Becker last week, running a gin cellar without a licence, they said?" Anne's expression remains neutral. "I hadn't heard. How unfortunate." "Indeed, though between us," Mr. Winters lowers his voice, "I suspect it was more about who he sold to rather than what he sold. Started catering to apprentices and young clerks. Masters complained their workers were perpetually sotted." This is another truth of the gin craze. Enforcement often depends less on the letter of the law than on who's being affected. When gin impairs the productivity of workers, suddenly it becomes a priority for the authorities. With your purchases wrapped and paid for, you and Anne head back through streets increasingly crowded with midday traffic. carts, carriages, sedan chairs carrying the wealthy who prefer not to soil their shoes on London's filthy streets. Mr. Winters seems to know a lot about the gin trade for an apothecary, you observe quietly as you walk. Anne chuckles. He supplies half the illegal distillers in London with their botanicals, knows more about what's happening in the trade than most of the sellers themselves. If anyone's ever arrested, he hears about it first. Isn't that risky for him? Less than you'd think. He's careful with his words, never sells complete gin-making kits and has enough respectable business to provide cover. Besides, she adds with a meaningful look, he provides certain medicinal preparations to some very influential people who wouldn't want him inconvenienced. It's another reminder of how the gin trade, like everything in Georgian London, operates within a complex web of power, privilege, and selective enforcement. The same laws that might send you to the House of Correction barely touch someone with the right connections. As you turn on to Anne's street, you notice a constable standing near her door speaking to a neighbour. Anne sees him too and smoothly changes direction, leading you down a side alley. "Let's take the back way," she says calmly, but you can hear the tension in her voice. You circle around to approach Anne's house from the rear, entering through the garden gate. Inside, she immediately goes to the window, peering cautiously through the curtains. "He's still there," she reports grimly. "And now there's another one with him." "Are they looking for you?" you ask, your heart racing with familiar fear. "You just started to feel safe, and now this." Anne shakes her head. "Not necessarily. Could be a routine patrol, could be they're investigating something else entirely, but you both know it could also be trouble. Even Anne's more discreet business isn't completely safe from the law. What do we do, you ask, instinctively gathering the botanical packages to hide them. Anne considers for a moment, then makes a decision. We wait. If they come to the door, I'm a respectable widow who makes medicinal cordials for ladies with delicate constitutions. You're my niece from the country, nothing illegal about that. But as the afternoon wears on, and the constables remain stationed outside, occasionally speaking to passers-by and pointing at houses, Anne's composure begins to crack. "Something's not right," she murmurs, checking the street again. "They're being too persistent." Just then, there's a sharp knock at the back door that makes you both jump. Anne motions for you to stay quiet and approaches cautiously. "Who is it?" she calls through the door. "It's me, Sarah," comes a woman's voice. "Let me in, quickly." Anne immediately opens the door to reveal a young woman in a servant's dress, looking anxiously over her shoulder. "Sarah works for Mrs. Winthrop," Anne explains as she ushers the girl inside. "What's happening?" Sarah wrings her hands nervously. "They've arrested Mr. Kellaway 3 doors down for selling gin without a license. They found his still and everything. Now they're going door to door, asking questions about other sellers in the neighbourhood." Anne's face pales. "Have they mentioned me?" "Not by name, ma'am, but they're asking about anyone who might be making or selling spirits. Mrs. Winthrop sent me to warn you. She says you should clear out anything incriminating. It's a kindness you wouldn't have expected from the nervous Mrs. Winthrop, and it speaks to how valued Anne's tonic must be to her." "Thank you, Sarah," Anne says, pressing a coin into the girl's hand. "You've taken a risk coming here." "Mrs. Winthrop would be most upset if her supply was interrupted," Sarah says, with a knowing look before slipping back out the garden door. As soon as she's gone, Anne springs into action. "We need to dismantle the still and hide the botanicals. Quickly now." You work together, taking apart the small copper still and concealing its components in various innocent-looking containers, the coil in a basket of knitting, the pot under a false bottom in a trunk, the collection vessel amongst kitchen crockery. The juniper and other botanicals go into tea caddies and spice jars disguised amongst normal household herbs. Bottles of finished tonic are hidden behind a loose board in the pantry. You've just finished when there's another knock, this time at the front door. Anne takes a deep breath, smooths her apron, and nods to you. Remember, medicinal cordials, nothing more. She opens the door to find, as expected, the two constables. They're both burly men with the weathered faces of those who've spent years patrolling London's streets. "Good afternoon, ma'am," the older one says, removing his hat with perfunctory politeness. "We're making inquiries in the neighbourhood regarding illegal gin selling." "Gin?" Anne repeats, her expression one of mild surprise. "How shocking. I've heard it's a terrible problem in some areas." "Indeed, ma'am. We have reason to believe there may be unlicensed operations in this very street. A Mr. Kellaway has been arrested, and he's suggested others might be involved." Your blood runs cold at these words. If Kellaway is naming names to save his own skin, Anne could be in real danger, but Anne's composure doesn't falter. "Well, I certainly know nothing about that. I'm a widow who makes medicinal cordials for ladies with delicate constitutions." She gestures toward you. "My niece, Elizabeth from the country, helps with deliveries." The younger constable's eyes narrow. "Cordials, you say? Made with what, exactly?" "Herbs, mostly," Anne replies smoothly. "Chamomile for nerves, mint for digestion, rose for feminine complaints. I'd be happy to show you my recipe book." She reaches for a small volume on a nearby shelf. A genuine herb book, you realise, that she keeps exactly for this purpose. The constables glance at each other, clearly uncertain. Anne's respectable appearance and confident manner make it difficult for them to press too hard without evidence. "We've been told someone on this street purchases large quantities of juniper berries," the older constable says, watching Anne's face carefully for a reaction. "Juniper? Oh yes, I use that occasionally," Anne admits readily. "It's excellent for urinary complaints. Many older ladies suffer, you know." She says this last part in a slightly lowered voice, as if sharing a delicate medical confidence. The constable shifts uncomfortably, clearly not wanting to pursue this line of questioning about women's ailments. "Perhaps we could see your, workshop," the younger one suggests, "where you prepare these cordials." "Of course," Anne agrees, leading them to the kitchen. "Though I've just cleaned up for the day. Elizabeth and I were about to have our tea." The constables look around the kitchen, which now appears perfectly innocent. Just the normal workspace of a woman who might make medicinal preparations with nothing to suggest gin production. They open a few cupboards, peer into jars, but their search is cursory. Without specific evidence or a warrant, they can't tear the place apart, and nothing obvious gives away Anne's real business. After a few more questions about her customers, respectable ladies with health concerns, her suppliers, Mr. Winters, a reputable apothecary, and how long she's been in the cordial business since her husband died 10 years ago, they seem satisfied, or at least stymied. "Thank you for your cooperation, ma'am," the older constable says, donning his hat again. "If you happen to hear anything about illegal gin operations, you'll inform us, of course." Naturally, Anne agrees, the perfect picture of a law-abiding citizen. One can't be too careful these days. So many unsavoury types about. Only when the door is firmly closed and the constables can be seen heading down the street do you both let out the breaths you've been holding. "That was close," you whisper, collapsing into a chair. Anne nods grimly. "Too close. Kellaway must be talking, trying to reduce his own punishment. We'll need to be even more careful now." What happens to him, you ask? To Kellaway, I mean. Depends on the magistrate, Anne says. Could be a fine if he's lucky, could be the House of Correction, could be worse if they decide to make an example of him. The gin laws are still harsh, even if they're not as draconian as they were a decade ago, and with moral reformers increasingly vocal about the gin crisis, the authorities are under pressure to show they're taking action. Maybe we should stop for a while, you suggest, just until things calm down. Anne considers this, then shakes her head. We can't afford to. My customers depend on their tonics, and we depend on their money. But we will need to be more cautious, perhaps change our delivery schedule, take different routes, and definitely reduce production for the next few weeks. As evening falls, you help Anne retrieve and reassemble her still. The brush with the law has shaken you both, but the economic reality remains unchanged. This is your livelihood, and stopping isn't an option. The thing about the gin trade, Anne says as you carefully reconnect the coil to the pot, is that it survives because people need it. Not just the drinkers, but the sellers, the suppliers, everyone involved. For many of us, it's gin or starvation. And that, perhaps, is the heart of the gin craze that has gripped London. Necessity as much as addiction, survival as much as indulgence. In a city where clean water is scarce, food prices are high, and work is brutal when it's available at all, gin provides both escape for some and livelihood for others. As you settle in for the night, your new bed no longer feels quite as secure as it did yesterday. The constable's visit is a stark reminder that in Georgian London, security is always conditional, safety always temporary. The gin trade that has given you a chance at a better life could just as easily lead you to prison. But as Anne said, what choice do you really have? This is the world you inhabit, a world where survival often means walking the knife edge between law and necessity, where morality is a luxury many simply cannot afford. Sleep comes fitfully, filled with dreams of constables, hidden stills, and rivers of gin flowing through London's streets, drowning the unwary. A week passes with no further visits from the constables. You and Anne settle into a cautious routine, still making and delivering gin, but with added precautions. You take different routes each day, space out deliveries to avoid patterns, and Anne has reduced production slightly, just enough to be safer without losing essential income. You're adapting well to your new life. The respectable clothes, regular meals, and absence of constant fear have begun to change you. Your hands, once rough and chapped from harsh conditions, are softening. Your face has lost its pinched, hungry look. Even your posture has changed. You stand straighter, walk more confidently. "You're becoming a proper lady's companion," Anne remarks one morning as you prepare for deliveries. "Hard to believe you were selling gin from your pockets in St. Giles just weeks ago." "Don't know about lady," you reply, smoothing down your borrowed dress. "But it's nice not having constables chase me through the alleys every other day." Anne smiles. "Today I'm going to show you something different. We're visiting the Dark Horse." "What's that?" "A licensed gin shop, owned by my old friend Henry. It's important you understand how the legal side of the trade works. Licensed gin shops are a relatively new development in London. After the disastrous 1736 Gin Act drove the entire trade underground, the government realised prohibition wasn't working. Their more recent approach involves making licences more affordable while still regulating sales. It hasn't solved the gin crisis, but it's brought some of the trade into the open where it can be monitored and taxed. You set out mid-morning after completing essential deliveries to Anne's most regular customers. The Dark Horse is located near Holborn, in an area where tradespeople, clerks and labourers mix with the occasional slumming gentleman. From the outside, it's surprisingly respectable. A proper shopfront with a painted sign showing a black horse rearing against a blue background. No hidden entrances or secretive whispers here, just a straightforward place to buy and consume gin. Inside, the difference between this and the illegal dram shops of St Giles is striking. The floor is clean swept, there's actual seating along the walls, and a long polished counter runs the length of the room. Behind it stand rows of bottles on shelves, and a man in a clean apron serves customers with an actual measuring glass rather than just sloshing spirit into whatever container is available. "Henry," Anne calls, waving to the man behind the counter. The proprietor looks up, his weathered face breaking into a broad smile. "Anne, my dear, what a rare pleasure." He comes around the counter to embrace her warmly, then regards you with friendly curiosity. "And who's this?" "My niece, Elizabeth," Anne says, using the now familiar cover story. "She's helping with my business." "Welcome to the Dark Horse, Elizabeth," Henry says, bowing slightly. He's a man in his 50s, you guess, with the strong hands of someone who's worked hard all his life, but the keen eyes of a businessman. Any relation of Anne's is welcome here. The gin shop isn't crowded at this hour. A few labourers sit nursing glasses in the corner, taking a break from their morning work. A clerk type hunches over his drink alone, perhaps steeling himself for an afternoon of ledgers and figures. A pair of women in modest but neat dress chat, quietly over glasses so small they must hold barely a mouthful. "Quiet today," Anne observes as Henry leads you to a small table in the corner. "It'll pick up afternoon," Henry says. "Always does. Will you take a glass? On the house, of course." Anne nods. "Your special reserve, if you have it." Henry returns shortly with 3 small glasses of clear liquid. You notice immediately that it looks cleaner, more refined than the rough spirit sold in the slums. "Your health," Henry says, raising his glass slightly before taking a small sip. You follow suit, expecting the familiar burn of gin, but are surprised by the smoothness. It still has the juniper flavour, still warms your throat, but it doesn't feel like it's stripping the lining from your insides. "Good, isn't it?" Anne says, noting your expression. "This is what properly made gin should taste like. No turpentine, no vitriol, no adulterants." "How do you stay in business charging licence fees when there's so much cheaper gin available?" you ask Henry directly. He chuckles. "Smart question. The answer is quality and safety. My customers know what they're getting, won't blind them or kill them. Worth paying a bit more for that assurance. Plus respectability," Anne adds. "Some people won't buy from street sellers or visit dram shops, but they'll come to a licensed establishment." "That too," Henry agrees, "though I get plenty who start here early in the day, all proper, then end up in the penny gin shops by evening when they've drunk away their funds and still want more. This is the dark reality of the gin craze. It creates a thirst that's never fully quenched, driving people from respectable consumption to increasingly desperate measures as addiction takes hold." As you talk, the shop begins to fill with the midday crowd. More labourers, a few women who might be servants on their break, a couple of apprentices who look barely old enough to drink but already have the glazed eyes of regular consumers. "See that woman there?" Henry says quietly, nodding toward a haggard figure who's just entered. "She used to be a governess in a good family, started taking gin for her nerves, they said, lost her position when they found her passed out with the children unattended. Now she begs and does whatever else she can to afford her daily drinks." The woman's hands shake visibly as she places a few coins on the counter, receiving a small glass in return. She downs it in one swift motion, then immediately orders another, counting out her remaining money with painful care. "And that man by the window?" Anne joins in. "He was a skilled cabinet maker, had a shop of his own, apprentices. Gin took it all. Now he does odd jobs when he's sober enough, which isn't often." These are the casualties of the gin epidemic, people whose lives have been derailed by what started as casual consumption. You've seen plenty like them in St. Giles, but somehow their presence here in this cleaner, more respectable establishment makes their decline more stark, more tragic. "So you see why I make my gin as safe as possible," Anne says, "and why I limit how much I sell to any one customer. I don't want this to happen to my ladies." Henry snorts. "Your ladies are just as addicted, Anne. They just have enough money to maintain appearances." "Perhaps," Anne concedes, "but at least they're not drinking poison, and they can still function in their lives." The conversation is interrupted by the entrance of a group of well-dressed young men, clearly gentlemen slumming it for amusement. They're loud, already half-drunk from lunch, and immediately dominate the room with their entitled presence. "Your finest gin, my good man," the leader calls to Henry, slapping coins on the counter with unnecessary force. "And be quick about it." Henry's expression tightens, but he serves them promptly. You can tell he doesn't appreciate their tone, but can't afford to turn away paying customers, especially those who might spend freely. "7 shillings for that little bottle?" one of the gentlemen exclaims. "Highway robbery." "That's my best gin, sir," Henry replies evenly. "Dutch import, not local." "Well, pour it then. Let's see if it's worth the king's ransom you're charging." The gentlemen take their drinks to a table, making a great show of tasting critically and pronouncing judgment like connoisseurs, though their already inebriated state suggests they're hardly discerning drinkers. "Typical," Anne murmurs. "They'll drink themselves silly here, then go to their clubs and complain about the gin problem among the lower orders, as if their brandy and port make them any less drunk." This hypocrisy is at the heart of the gin crisis. The wealthy and powerful condemn gin consumption by the poor while indulging freely themselves in other spirits. They pass laws restricting cheap gin while ensuring their own preferred drinks remain easily available. As you watch, the young gentlemen become increasingly boisterous, calling for more drinks, making loud remarks about the other patrons, behaving as if the place exists solely for their entertainment. "Should we leave?" you ask Anne, noticing how uncomfortable the atmosphere has become. She nods. "I think we've seen enough for today." You say your goodbyes to Henry, who's too busy managing the rowdy gentleman to do more than wave. Outside, the relative quiet of the street is a relief after the tense atmosphere inside. "That's another side of the gin trade," Anne says as you walk back toward her neighbourhood. "The licensed places are safer, more regulated, but they're caught between worlds, trying to be respectable enough for their license, but still selling a product that's associated with vice and poverty." "And those gentlemen," you ask, "do they really not see their own hypocrisy?" Anne shrugs. "People see what they want to see. To them, their drinking is sophisticated indulgence. The poor man's drinking is moral failure. Same gin, different bottle." As you turn onto a busier street, you notice a crowd gathered around a man standing on a crate, another temperance preacher by the looks of him, Bible in hand, condemning the evils of gin. "The devil's drink," he proclaims dramatically, "stealing the bread from children's mouths, turning women into harlots and men into beasts." The crowd's reaction is mixed. Some nod in agreement, others heckle, many simply listen out of momentary curiosity before moving on with their day. He's not entirely wrong, Anne admits quietly as you skirt the edge of the gathering. Gin has ruined many lives, but what he doesn't understand is that for many, it's not just about the drink itself, but what it represents, a brief escape from unbearable conditions. Like medicine for the soul instead of the body, you suggest. Anne looks at you with surprise. That's quite a poetic way to put it. But yes, I suppose so, though it's medicine that often kills the patient in the end. Back at Anne's house, you help her prepare a new batch of tonic, working with the skills she's been teaching you. Your hands are steadier now, your measurements more precise. You're becoming a proper distiller, not just a mixer of dubious ingredients. You're a quick learner, Anne observes as you correctly adjust the flame under the still. Another month and you could run your own operation. The comment catches you off guard. You haven't thought much about the future beyond the immediate relief of having food, shelter, and relative safety. The idea of having your own business, being truly independent, is both thrilling and terrifying. I couldn't afford a still, you point out, or suppliers, or a safe place to work. All things that come with time and careful saving, Anne says. I didn't start with much more than you had, just a determination not to end up in the workhouse after James died. Before you can respond, there's a knock at the door. Not the front entrance, but the back garden door, which is unusual. Anne frowns, motioning for you to stay with the still while she answers. You hear muffled voices, then Anne returns with a young man you don't recognize. He's perhaps in his mid-20s, simply but neatly dressed, with an intelligent face currently creased with worry. Elizabeth, this is Robert, Mrs. Winthrop's son, Anne introduces him. He has some troubling news. Robert nods to you distractedly, clearly more concerned with his message than with pleasantries. Mother sent me to warn you, he says to Anne. The constables are conducting searches again, this time with warrants. They've already raided 3 houses on Lambert Street. Your blood runs cold. Warrants mean they can legally search homes, not just ask questions at the door. If they come here, all your careful hiding of equipment won't matter. They'll have the authority to tear the place apart. Did they find anything? Anne asks, her voice steady despite the threat. 2 stills and several gallons of gin at old Mrs. Peters's place, Robert confirms grimly. They've arrested her, and they found bottles at the Clarkson house, though no still. They're taking statements, asking who supplied them. The implication is clear. If those arrested give up their suppliers or customers to save themselves, Anne could be next on the list for investigation. Thank you for the warning, Robert, Anne says. Your mother is very kind to risk sending you. She's worried about her medicine, Robert says, with a wry smile that suggests he's well aware of what his mother is really consuming. She asked me to inquire if you might have any set aside for emergencies. Anne hesitates only briefly before going to her hiding place and retrieving 2 bottles of tonic. She wraps them carefully in cloth and hands them to Robert. Tell her to make these last, she warns. I may need to suspend deliveries for a while. Robert tucks the package inside his coat. She'll understand, and I'll keep an ear out for any more news about the searches. After he leaves, Anne immediately begins dismantling the still, working with urgent efficiency. We need to get everything hidden, more thoroughly than before, and we should reduce our stock, deliver what we can to trustworthy customers, dispose of the rest if necessary. You work together in tense silence, taking apart the still and hiding components in ever more creative places. The copper coil goes inside a rolled carpet in the attic. The pot is buried in a large sack of flour. Bottles are dispersed throughout the house, hidden in teapots, under floorboards, inside hollowed-out books. By evening, you've transformed the house from an illegal gin distillery back into the innocuous home of a widow who makes medicinal cordials. Nothing obviously incriminating remains visible. Anne collapses into a chair, exhausted from the stress and physical effort. "This is the worst part of the trade," she sighs. "The constant fear, the need to dismantle everything you've built at a moment's notice." "Will it always be like this?" you ask, sinking into the chair opposite her. "Always hiding, always afraid?" Anne considers the question. "Probably, yes. At least until the laws change again. The authorities need to be seen doing something about the gin crisis, so there will always be raids, arrests, examples made. Our only protection is discretion and having customers who won't inform on us." The precariousness of your situation weighs heavily on you. Just when you were starting to feel secure, to imagine a future beyond daily survival, the threat of arrest looms again. Unlike your comfortable bed back home in your time, security in Georgian London is never more than an illusion. "What about leaving London?" you suggest. "Setting up somewhere smaller where there's less scrutiny?" Anne shakes her head. "Smaller places have fewer customers, and everyone knows everyone's business. At least in London, there's anonymity in the crowd. Besides, all my connections are here, my suppliers, my customers." She's right, of course. London may be dangerous for gin sellers, but it also offers opportunities that nowhere else in England can match. The sheer number of potential customers, the dense network of suppliers and fellow traders, the ability to blend into the anonymous mass of humanity. All these make London the natural home of the gin trade, both legal and illegal. That night, you struggle to sleep, your mind racing with contingency plans. What if the constables come tomorrow? What if Anne is arrested? Would you go back to St. Giles, back to selling penny gin in the streets? The thought makes your stomach twist with dread. When morning comes, it brings not constables, but a letter, delivered by a maid from one of Anne's customers' homes. The seal is unfamiliar, and Anne frowns as she breaks it open. "It's from Lady Jenkins," she says, scanning the contents. "She's invited us to attend her at home today, says it's urgent." "Is it safe?" you ask. After yesterday's warnings, any deviation from routine seems risky. "Safer than staying here waiting for constables," Anne points out. And Lady Jenkins has considerable influence. If anyone might help us navigate this situation, it's her. You dress in your best borrowed clothes, a blue dress that once belonged to Anne's daughter, with a clean white cap and collar that make you look like a respectable lady's companion. The transformation from St. Giles' gin cellar to something approaching gentility still amazes you when you catch glimpses of yourself in Anne's small-looking glass. Lady Jenkins's home is even more impressive by daylight than it was during your previous visit. The entrance hall alone is larger than Anne's entire house, with a sweeping staircase and actual paintings on the walls. A livered footman leads you not to the morning room where you last met her, but to a small private sitting room at the back of the house. Lady Jenkins herself looks less composed than before. Her cap is slightly askew, her complexion flushed, and she clutches a handkerchief in hands that tremble noticeably. "Anne, thank heaven you've come," she says, dismissing the servant with a wave. "And your niece?" She gives you a distracted nod. "We have a situation. A crisis, in fact." "What's happened, my lady?" Anne asks, taking the seat Lady Jenkins gestures to. "It's this dreadful business with the gin raids," Lady Jenkins explains, lowering her voice though no servants are present. "My friend Lady Harrington was hosting a small gathering yesterday, just a few of us ladies taking tea. She serves your tonics, you know." Anne nods. Lady Harrington is indeed one of her customers, though not one you've delivered to personally. "Well?" Lady Jenkins continues. In the midst of our gathering, if you can believe it, constables arrived with a warrant. They claimed to have information that gin was being sold from the premises. Anne's face pales. Did they find anything? Nothing in the public rooms, thank God. But when they searched the pantry, they discovered bottles. Lady Harrington claimed they were medicinal cordials, of course, but the constables were most suspicious. They've taken samples away for testing. This is serious indeed. If the authorities are now targeting houses of the gentry, not just the poor or middle class, the crackdown must be more severe than you realised. Was Lady Harrington arrested? Anne asks quietly. Lady Jenkins shakes her head. Her husband has too many connections for that, but she was questioned most rudely, and the whole affair has caused a terrible scandal. And now her voice drops even lower. Now we are all terrified they'll come to our homes next. If they found bottles at Harrington House, what's to stop them searching here? Or Lady Pembroke's? Or Mrs. Fitzwilliam's? You suddenly understand why you've been summoned. This isn't just about Lady Jenkins's concern for Anne. It's about protecting herself and her circle from the embarrassment and potential legal consequences of their gin consumption being exposed. What would you have us do, my lady? Anne asks carefully. Lady Jenkins leans forward earnestly. You must suspend your deliveries, at least for a time, and she hesitates. I need you to take away my current supply, all of it. If they search here, I cannot have it found. The request is both reasonable and dangerous. Removing evidence from Lady Jenkins's home protects her, but it puts Anne at even greater risk if she's caught transporting multiple bottles. We could perhaps take 1 or 2 bottles now, Anne suggests, and return for the rest after dark when there's less chance of being observed. But Lady Jenkins is already shaking her head. No, it must be all, and it must be now. I've had it gathered. She rings a small bell, and a maid appears with a covered basket. Here, everything from my private cabinet. The basket is passed to you, and even without looking inside, you can tell it contains at least a dozen bottles, a significant amount of evidence if you're stopped on the way home. My lady, this is very risky, Anne protests gently. If we're seen carrying so much, more risky for me to keep it, Lady Jenkins insists. I've included payment as well for your trouble and discretion. She gives a meaningful look at the basket. Anne recognises the implicit bribe and nods slowly. As you wish. Is there anything else we should know? Any other houses being searched? They seem to be working their way through Mayfair and Bloomsbury, Lady Jenkins says, following some list of suspected suppliers or customers, we think. Lady Pembroke heard from her husband, who heard from a magistrate, that they have informers in several households, servants paid to report on their master's drinking habits. This is a new and troubling development. If even the servants of the wealthy are turning informer, no one in the gin trade is safe. You and Anne take your leave with the incriminating basket now covered with a cloth as if it contains nothing more interesting than sewing supplies. The weight of it is concerning. You'll need to take turns carrying it to avoid attracting attention. This changes everything, Anne says quietly as you walk, keeping to side streets and less travelled paths. If they're targeting the gentry now, my entire business model is at risk. Could you get a licence, you suggest? Become legal like Henry at the Dark Horse? Anne shakes her head. The licenses may be cheaper than they were, but they're still beyond my means, and they're only for public houses, not for private selling. My business is built on discretion and home delivery, exactly the kind of trade the authorities are trying to stamp out. The reality of your situation is becoming clear. The gin trade that has supported you both is under increasing threat, caught between moral panic, class hypocrisy, and the government's need to be seen addressing the problem. As you turn onto Anne's street, you see something that makes your blood freeze. A constable standing outside her door, knocking repeatedly. There's no way to reach the house without being seen. "Keep walking," Anne whispers, not breaking stride. "Don't look back. We'll go to the church on Northampton Street and figure out what to do." You continue past Anne's street as casually as possible, the basket of gin bottles suddenly feeling as obvious as a sign hanging around your neck. The constable doesn't appear to notice you. His attention is focused on the house, but you can't help feeling exposed, vulnerable. The church is empty when you arrive, the cool stone interior, a temporary sanctuary from both the summer heat and the threat of arrest. You sit in a back pew, the basket between you, speaking in whispers despite being alone. "They must have connected me to someone who's been arrested," Anne says, her face drawn with worry. "Or one of my customers has talked to save themselves." "What do we do now?" you ask. "We can't go home and we can't walk around London all day with a basket full of gin." Anne thinks for a moment. "We need somewhere safe to stay, at least for tonight, somewhere the authorities wouldn't think to look for us." A thought occurs to you. "What about St. Giles? They'd never expect you to go there, and I still know people who might help us." Anne looks uncertain. "It's dangerous for someone like me. I don't know my way around, don't know who to trust." "But I do," you say with more confidence than you feel, "and no one will look twice at us if we dress differently. We could hide there until we figure out what to do next." It's a desperate plan, but with constables at Anne's door and Lady Jenkins's gin in your possession, desperate measures are called for. The respectable life you were just beginning to build is crumbling, and survival once again takes precedence over comfort or safety. "All right," Anne agrees reluctantly, "but we'll need different clothes. We can't walk into St. Giles looking like this." You consider the problem. "There's a second-hand clothes market near Covent Garden. We could sell some of Lady Jenkins's gin to raise money, buy cheaper clothes, and still have some left to barter for shelter." It's a plan born of necessity rather than choice, but it's better than being arrested with incriminating evidence. As you leave the church, the weight of uncertainty settles over you like a physical burden. The gin trade that offered a path out of poverty now threatens to drag you back down, or worse, to prison. As you make your way toward Covent Garden, you can't help thinking about the bitter irony of your situation. The gin that London can't seem to live without, that fuels its economy and eases its pain, is simultaneously the target of moral outrage and legal persecution. And caught in the middle are people like you and Anne, neither the destitute drunk nor the hypocritical reformer, just ordinary people trying to make a living in a world that offers few legitimate options for women alone. The second-hand clothes market buzzes with activity as you and Anne make your way through the crowded stalls. Here, the cast-offs of the wealthy change hands multiple times, moving down the social ladder until they're little more than rags. It's a perfect place to shed your respectable appearance and become anonymous once more. "We'll need to look poor, but not destitute," you explain quietly to Anne. "Destitute draws attention. Everyone wants to know if you've got something worth stealing. Ordinary poor is safer. People barely notice you." Anne nods, studying the stalls with new eyes. "I haven't done this in years," she admits. "Not since just after James died." It strikes you again how similar your paths have been, though separated by time. Both widowed, both driven to the gin trade by necessity, both navigating the perilous waters of London's underbelly. You find a clothes seller, a sharp-eyed woman who sizes you up immediately. noting your relatively good clothes with a calculating gaze. "Looking to trade down, are we?" she asks, not bothering to hide her curiosity. "Husband gamble away the household money?" "Something like that," Anne replies smoothly, adopting a wearier tone than her usual confident manner. "Needs something less noticeable." The woman nods, understanding. Many in London have reason to change their appearance, and she's not one to ask too many questions when there's profit to be made. You select simple, worn dresses, the kind worn by laundresses or market women, not the absolute bottom of the clothing hierarchy, but firmly in the working poor category, the kind of women who might have a few pennies but no real security. 6 shillings for both, the seller says firmly. It's highway robbery, but you're not in a position to haggle too hard. You glance at Anne, who nods slightly. From the basket, you carefully extract one of Lady Jenkins's gin bottles, keeping it wrapped in cloth as you handle it. "We don't have coin," you say quietly, "but we have this." You reveal just enough of the bottle for the woman to understand what you're offering. Her eyes sharpen with interest. "Real gin, not the turpentine muck?" "Ladies' tonic," Anne says. "Finest quality." The seller considers for a moment, then nods. "The dresses, and I'll throw in those caps and aprons, but I want to taste it first." You pour a tiny amount into the cup she provides. She sips, her eyebrows rising in appreciation. "Smooth. You didn't steal this from some gentleman's cabinet, did you?" She doesn't wait for an answer. "No matter. Deal." Transaction completed, you and Anne find a quiet alley to change clothes. The transformation is remarkable. Anne, who just hours ago looked like a respectable widow of modest means, now resembles any of the thousands of aging washerwomen who scrape by in London's poorer quarters. You too have reverted to a familiar look. The working poor woman, invisible to all but those in the same situation. "What do we do with our old clothes?" Anne asks, bundling up the dress she was wearing. "Sell them elsewhere," you suggest. "We could use the coin, with your appearance suitably altered and the gin bottles distributed between your pockets and the now less conspicuous basket covered with the mending you'd actually need if you were the laundress you're pretending to be." You set off toward St. Giles. "Remember," you tell Anne, as the buildings grow shabbier and the streets narrower, "walk like you're tired but alert, like you've done hard work all day but you're still watching for pickpockets, and let me do the talking." St. Giles hits you with a wave of familiar smells: sewage, unwashed bodies, smoke from cheap fires, the yeasty scent of spilled beer, and underneath it all, the sharp bite of gin. Unlike the prosperous areas where gin consumption hides behind closed doors and polite fictions, here it's right out in the open. Men drink from bottles as they walk. Women pass gin to crying children to quiet them. The elderly huddle in doorways, nursing small cups of oblivion. "My God," Anne whispers, her eyes wide as you pass a group of children no more than 6 or 7 years old, sharing a bottle of gin like it's water. "I knew it was bad, but this is why the moral reformers aren't entirely wrong," you acknowledge. "But taking away the gin without fixing what drives people to it would just create different horrors." You lead Anne through increasingly narrow alleys, keeping a watchful eye out for threats. St. Giles operates on its own rules, unwritten but strictly enforced by necessity and communal understanding. The wrong turn, the wrong word could spell danger. "Where exactly are we going?" Anne asks, staying close as you navigate the labyrinth. "To see an old friend," you tell her, "if she's still alive." Mrs. Cooper's building looks even more decrepit than you remember, which hardly seems possible. The walls lean at concerning angles, the windows patched with paper and cloth where glass should be. You climb the familiar stairs, now noticing how they creak and sag in places your body had memorized to avoid. On the second floor, you knock on a door you know well. "Who is it?" comes a weak, suspicious voice. "Lizzie Bowman," you call back, using your maiden name instinctively. Back from the dead, you might say. There's a shuffling sound, then the door cracks open to reveal Mrs. Cooper's face, even more gaunt than when you left. Her eyes widen in genuine surprise. "Lord above, it is you," she wheezes. "Thought you'd gone respectable and forgotten us all." "Never that," you assure her. "May we come in? We need help." Her eyes shift to Anne, narrowing in assessment. "Who's she?" "My friend. She's in trouble too. Please, Mrs. Cooper, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't important. Perhaps it's the genuine desperation in your voice, or perhaps it's the memory of the gin you used to share." But Mrs. Cooper steps back, opening her door wider. "Come on then, though there's precious little I can do for anyone these days." The room is as you remember, small, dark and damp, with the barest essentials for living. Mrs. Cooper's cough is clearly worse, and you notice a blood-stained cloth hastily tucked under her pillow, consumption advancing quickly now. "This is Anne," you introduce. "We've been working together, making gin for better clients, but the constables are after us now. We need somewhere to stay, just for a few days." Mrs. Cooper sinks onto her thin mattress, the effort of standing clearly taxing her. "Constables, eh? Getting bold coming after respectable-looking ladies like yourselves. We brought compensation," Anne says, producing one of the gin bottles from her pocket. "The good stuff, not street gin." Mrs. Cooper's eyes light up. "Well now, that changes things, though I can't offer much, just floor space, and not even that's entirely mine. I share with the Thomas family now, 4 of them in that corner." She gestures to a screened-off area. "It's enough," you assure her. "We just need to stay out of sight while we figure out what to do next." As if summoned by the mention of their name, the screen shifts and a harried-looking woman appears, a baby on her hip and a toddler clinging to her skirts. "Who's this then?" she asks, eyeing you and Anne suspiciously. "Old friends," Mrs. Cooper says vaguely. "Staying a day or two." Mrs. Thomas, you assume that's who she is, doesn't look pleased, but she doesn't object. Space is a luxury in St. Giles, but so is having enough people to share the rent. She disappears back behind her screen without another word. 4 of them in that corner. 3 more coming in at night, Mrs. Cooper explains quietly. "The husband, the oldest boy, and the grandfather. They work the markets. 8 of us in this room now, plus you 2 makes 10. The casual overcrowding shocks Anne, you can tell, but it's standard for St. Giles. Many families pack into spaces meant for 1 or 2, sleeping in shifts, living on top of each other in conditions that would horrify the middle and upper classes. What happened to having your own place, you ask Mrs. Cooper. She shrugs, the movement triggering a coughing fit. When she recovers, she explains, "Couldn't work anymore. Lungs got worse. Thomas family needed somewhere after the fire in their building. We help each other. You know how it is." You do know. In the desperate economy of the poor, mutual aid is often the only thing standing between survival and disaster. People share what little they have because tomorrow it might be them needing help. As evening approaches, the room grows more crowded. The Thomas men return from their day's labour, the father selling trinkets in the market, the son and grandfather collecting scraps and bones for resale. They acknowledge you and Anne with wary nods, too exhausted to ask many questions. Dinner is a communal affair, a thin stew that Mrs. Thomas has somehow stretched to feed 10 people. You and Anne contribute a loaf of bread purchased with money from selling your better clothes, and the addition makes the meal almost substantial. Afterward, the gin bottle comes out. Mrs. Cooper takes the first drink, closing her eyes in appreciation of the smooth, properly made spirit, so different from the harsh street gin she's used to. "Christ, that's good," she murmurs, like drinking liquid gold. The bottle makes its way around the adults, each taking a careful sip, savouring the rare quality. Even Mr. Thomas, initially standoffish, softens after his taste. "Where'd you get this?" he asks. "Not St. Giles gin, that's certain." "We make it," Anne says simply. "Or did, until today." "Proper distilling?" he asks, interest piqued. "With a real still?" Anne nods. "Small one, but proper. Copper pot, coil, the works." Mr. Thomas leans forward, lowering his voice. "My cousin worked at a distillery before the crackdowns, taught me a bit about proper gin making. Always thought if I could get the equipment might be a way out of the markets." "It's risky," Anne cautions, "especially now, with the constables on high alert." "Everything's risky in London," Mrs. Thomas interjects, the baby now asleep on her lap. "Jim risks his neck on rickety scaffolds. I risk consumption in the laundries. Gin's no different." She has a point. For the working poor, all forms of earning are fraught with danger, physical, legal, or moral. The gin trade is just one more hazardous way to avoid starvation. As night falls completely, sleeping arrangements are negotiated. The Thomas family crowds behind their screen. Mrs. Cooper takes her mattress, her breathing laboured even in rest. You and Anne make do with a cleared space of floor and your shawls for covering. "I'd forgotten," you whisper to Anne in the darkness, the sounds of 8 other people breathing, coughing, shifting, filling the small room. "How it was, living like this. I never forgot," Anne replies softly. "It's why I worked so hard to get out, why I'll do whatever it takes not to come back permanently." In the dim glow of banked coals, you study your mentor's face. There's a determination there that matches your own, a will to survive, to rise, to find some measure of comfort in a world designed to grind people like you into dust. "We need a new plan," you say. "We can't stay here long." Anne nods. "I have some ideas, but first we need to find out if it's safe to return to my house, or if they've seized everything already." Sleep comes fitfully, your body remembering but not welcoming the hard floor, the sounds and smells of too many people in too small a space. The physical discomfort of St. Giles is a shock after weeks in Anne's relatively comfortable home. Morning brings a new perspective on your situation. In the harsh light of day, the realities of life in St. Giles are even more stark. The Thomas children wake cranky and hungry. Mrs. Cooper's cough is worse, each spasm shaking her frail body. The room smells of too many unwashed bodies, and the chamber pot that needs emptying. "I'll go out," you tell Anne after a breakfast of dry bread. "See what I can learn about the constables, if it's safe to go back." "I'll come with you," she insists. "Better not to separate." You dress in your laundry-women disguises and venture out into St. Giles. The morning brings a different energy to the streets. People rushing to work, children running errands, vendors setting up for the day. But underneath the activity, there's the ever-present current of gin. "Look," you say, nodding toward a woman selling gin from a cart, not even pretending it's anything else. No Puss and Mew, no tonic labels, just open selling. "The constables don't bother much with St. Giles unless there's a specific complaint," you explain to Anne. "Too many sellers, too little profit in arresting them. They focus on bigger operations or areas where the neighbours might actually report someone." It's another of London's hypocrisies. Gin selling is most aggressively policed where it might offend respectable sensibilities, not where it does the most harm. You lead Anne through the morning bustle to a small coffee house on the edge of the district. Despite its shabby exterior, it's known for reliable gossip and information. The owner, a former sailor named Davis, knows everything that happens in this part of London. Inside, the smell of coffee, real coffee, not the sawdust and acorn substitute sold in poorer establishments, mingles with tobacco smoke. A few early customers sit at rough tables, nursing cups and pipes. Davis looks up as you enter, his one good eye focusing sharply. He's missing the other from some naval battle long ago, and the empty socket is covered with a leather patch. "Lizzie Bowman," he says with genuine surprise. "Thought you'd moved up in the world." "Had a setback," you admit, approaching the counter. "Need information, Davis." "Information costs," he responds automatically. You glance at Anne, who subtly reveals the neck of one of Lady Jenkins's gin bottles. Davis's eye widens appreciatively. "Good gin for good information you offer." "Fair trade?" He considers, then nods. "What do you need to know?" "Constables doing gin raids. How widespread? Which neighbourhoods? Any word on specific targets?" Davis leans in, lowering his voice. "Big crackdown. Bigger than usual. Word is some bishop got in the ear of a minister who got in the ear of the king. They're hitting everywhere, not just the usual suspects in Seven Dials and such, but proper houses in Bloomsbury and even Mayfair." "Any names mentioned?" Anne asks anxiously. "Any specific streets?" Davis shrugs. "They're working through a list. Someone's been informing. Servant from one of the big houses. Turned in her mistress and half the lady's friends for drinking gin. Domino effect from there. Your stomach sinks. If servants are informing on their employers, the entire network of tonic customers could be compromised." "What about a house near Covent Garden?" you ask, describing Anne's location without being too specific. "Widow who sells cordials?" Davis thinks for a moment. "Heard something about a raid there yesterday. Don't know the outcome, but they took ledgers from another place nearby. Names, addresses, the whole business." Anne pales. She keeps meticulous records of her customers and suppliers, a necessary part of running her business properly, but now potentially damning evidence. You surrender one of the precious gin bottles, which Davis accepts with a small salute. "If I hear anything more specific, I'll get word to Mrs. Cooper's place." Back on the street, Anne looks shell-shocked. "If they have my ledger, they have everything. Every customer, every supplier, Mr. Winters, Lady Jenkins, all of them." "Maybe not," you try to reassure her. "Maybe they didn't find it. You hid it well, didn't you?" "Under a floorboard in my bedroom," she says. "Not the most original hiding place. If they searched thoroughly, the implication hangs in the air. If the authorities have Anne's customer list, it's not just her livelihood at stake, but potentially her freedom. Selling gin without a license can mean fines, imprisonment, even transportation to the colonies in severe cases." "We need more information," you decide. "We need to know exactly what they found, who they've arrested, what charges are being brought." "How do we do that without exposing ourselves?" Anne asks. You think for a moment. "Jack," you say suddenly. "Jack Rann might know. He has connections everywhere, deals with everyone from street sellers to gentlemen's clubs." "Your supplier, the flashy one with the silver strings on his breeches?" Anne sounds doubtful. "Can he be trusted?" "Probably not completely," you admit, "but he knows the gin trade better than almost anyone, and he likes me, or did. It's worth trying. The challenge is finding Jack. He doesn't keep regular hours or locations, moving constantly to avoid the authorities who are always interested in spirits, smugglers and dealers. He usually drinks at the Black Dog in the afternoons, you tell Anne. If he's not there, someone will know where to find him." The Black Dog is a tavern on the border between St Giles and the somewhat more respectable areas to the east. It caters to a mixed clientele, labourers, craftsmen, the occasional clerk slumming it, and people like Jack who live in the shadows of London's economy. Inside, the air is thick with pipe smoke and the smell of ale. Unlike the gin shops, taverns serve mainly beer, considered a healthier, more patriotic drink than gin by the authorities. Of course, many customers drink both, starting with ale and ending with the harder stuff as their funds and sobriety diminish. You scan the room, looking for Jack's distinctive figure. He's not immediately visible among the early afternoon drinkers. He's not here, you tell Anne. Let's ask the barman. The man behind the counter is built like a bull, with arms thick from lifting barrels and throwing out troublemakers. He eyes you suspiciously as you approach. Looking for Jack Rann, you say directly. Know where I might find him? Depends who's asking, the barman replies, wiping a mug with a cloth that looks dirtier than the mug itself. Elizabeth Bowman, you say. He knows me, used to supply me in St Giles. Recognition flickers in the barman's eyes. Lizzie? Right. Heard you'd moved up to better things. He glances at your current appearance. Though maybe not, eh? Just hit a rough patch, you say. Need to talk to Jack. It's important. The barman considers, then shrugs. Try the Golden Hind. He's been drinking there lately, got himself a new fancy woman who likes the place. The Golden Hind is several steps up from the Black Dog, a coaching inn that caters to travellers and more prosperous locals. If Jack is drinking there, he must be doing well for himself. It's a long walk across London, and you and Anne are both tired and anxious by the time you arrive. The inn stands in stark contrast to the places you've been today. Clean, well-maintained, with actual glass in all its windows and a freshly painted sign showing a gilded deer. We're not dressed for this place, Anne murmurs, looking down at her laundrywoman's garb. We'll say we have a message for him, you suggest. Servants often deliver messages. Inside, the inn is busy with the afternoon trade. Merchants having late lunches, travellers resting from their journeys, locals enjoying better ale than they'd get in ordinary taverns. And there, holding court at a corner table surrounded by admirers, is Jack Rann. He looks even more prosperous than when you last saw him. His clothes are finer, his manner more confident. The silver strings on his breeches have been replaced by gold ones, and he sports a new waistcoat embroidered with what appears to be real silver thread. Wait here, you tell Anne and approach Jack's table. He doesn't notice you at first, engrossed in telling some tale that has his companions in stitches. When you clear your throat, he looks up irritably, then does a double take. Lizzie, he says incredulously, what the devil happened to you, and what are you doing here? Need to talk, you say quietly, privately. It's important. Jack studies your face, sees the urgency there, and makes a quick decision. Excuse me, friends, he says to his companions. Business calls. Urgent matter regarding imports. He leads you to a small alcove away from the main room, gesturing for Anne to join you. Who's this? He asks, eyeing her with professional suspicion. Anne, my partner. We need information, Jack. Quickly, you explain your situation. The constables at Anne's house, the raids on gin cellars across different neighbourhoods, the threat to both your livelihoods and freedom. Jack listens with growing seriousness, his usual flamboyance dimming. When you finish, he runs a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. It's bad, Lizzie, really bad. This isn't just the usual show of cracking down. They're going after everyone, from street sellers to proper distillers. Even the licensed places are being scrutinised for selling to the wrong people or at the wrong times. What about Anne's place, specifically, you press? Do you know if they found her ledger, if they're looking for me too? Jack glances around to make sure no one is within earshot. I heard they raided a widow's place near Covent Garden yesterday, took books, bottles, equipment, arrested her in absentia. That means they're looking for her. Anne's face drains of colour. And her assistant? Did they mention an assistant or niece? Jack shrugs. Didn't hear details, but if your name's in that ledger or if any of the customers talk, he leaves the implication hanging. What should we do? You ask, desperation creeping into your voice. We can't stay in St. Giles forever. Jack considers for a moment. You got any money or goods worth selling? Some, Anne says cautiously. The gin we have left, a few pieces of jewellery I kept hidden. Enough to get out of London? Jack asks. Because that's what I'd do. This crackdown will burn itself out eventually. They always do. The city needs its gin too much to sustain a serious effort for long, but in the meantime, it's not safe for known sellers. Where would we go? You ask. The idea of leaving London is both terrifying and strangely liberating. You've never been beyond the city's borders in your adult life. Bristol, Jack suggests, or Edinburgh. Both have growing gin trades but less scrutiny than London, or if you really want to be safe, the colonies. America's always looking for people who know how to distill. America seems impossibly far, a place of legend rather than a real option. But Bristol or Edinburgh, those might be possible. We'd need a way to get there safely, Anne points out, and somewhere to stay when we arrive. Jack smiles, his natural cockiness returning. That, my dears, is where I can help. I know people everywhere, stagecoaches, ship captains, innkeepers. For the right price, I can arrange everything. And what's the right price? You ask suspiciously. Jack's help never comes cheap. He names a figure that makes both you and Anne wince. It's more than you have, even counting Lady Jenkins's remaining gin and Anne's hidden valuables. But, Jack adds, seeing your expressions, I might be willing to negotiate for old time's sake and a favour. What kind of favour? Anne asks warily. I need someone in Bristol anyway, Jack explains. Someone who knows quality gin, who can receive shipments, test the product, deal with local buyers. Could be a profitable arrangement for all of us. It's a lifeline, albeit one attached to Jack Rann, who's never been entirely trustworthy. But in your current situation, options are limited. We need to discuss it, you tell him. Can we meet tomorrow? Jack nods. Same time here, but don't wait too long to decide. The constables aren't likely to give up looking just because you've disappeared for a few days. He slips you a few coins before you leave. For old time's sake, he insists. And you and Anne head back towards St. Giles, minds racing with this new possibility. Can we trust him? Anne asks as you walk. Not completely, you admit, but Jack's primarily interested in profit. If helping us makes him money, he'll do it, and he does know everyone worth knowing in the trade. Bristol, Anne says thoughtfully. I've heard it's growing quickly. Lots of trade, lots of opportunity. And far enough from London that the constables aren't likely to follow, you add. The idea begins to take shape as you walk, a fresh start in a new city, away from the intensifying crackdown in London. You could apply what you've learned about quality gin production, build something more sustainable than either street selling or Anne's precarious tonic business. By the time you reach Mrs. Cooper's crowded room, a decision has formed between you, unspoken but mutually understood. London has become too dangerous. The gin trade here is caught in a vice between moral panic and legal persecution. Perhaps it's time to try somewhere new. Mrs. Cooper listens to your plan with mixed emotions. Bristol's a long way, she says when you finish explaining. Never been outside London myself. Come with us, you suggest impulsively. We'll need help setting up the new business, and the sea air might be better for your cough. She smiles, sadly, another coughing fit overtaking her before she can respond. When she catches her breath, there's blood on her handkerchief. "Too late for me, Lizzie, but you go. Make something of yourself." That night, lying on the hard floor of the crowded room, you stare at the ceiling and contemplate the turns your life has taken, from respectable wife to widow to gin seller in St. Giles to Anne's assistant, and now, potentially, to Bristol with a new start, all driven by the need to survive in a world that offers women like you precious few options. The gin that flows through London's veins has shaped your path at every turn, as livelihood, as danger, as opportunity, and now it's pushing you beyond the only city you've ever known into an uncertain future. As you drift towards sleep, the sounds of the tenement around you, coughing, snoring, a baby's cry, a drunk's song from the street below, form a familiar lullaby, the soundtrack of a London caught in the grip of the gin-craze, a city simultaneously nourished and poisoned by the spirit that's become its lifeblood. Tomorrow you'll meet Jack again, finalise plans, take another step in your journey through this gin-soaked world. But tonight, in this crowded room that smells of poverty and sickness, you're reminded of what you're fighting to escape and what drives so many to seek solace in Madame Geneva's cold embrace. Morning arrives with a coughing fit from Mrs. Cooper that's so violent it wakes everyone in the cramped room. There's more blood than yesterday, and her breathing sounds like wet paper tearing. The Thomas family watches with the resigned sadness of people who've seen consumption claim too many neighbours to be shocked anymore. "We should get a doctor," you suggest, though you know it's futile. Mrs. Cooper shakes her head weakly. "Waste of money. They'll just bleed me and give me mercury, make things worse." She's not wrong. Georgian medicine often does more harm than good, especially for the poor who can only afford the least skilled practitioners. The best doctors charge fees that would feed a St. Giles family for months. "At least take this," Anne says, pouring a small measure of gin into a cup. "For the pain." Mrs. Cooper accepts gratefully, the spirit seeming to ease her breathing temporarily. "You're good girls," she wheezes, "both of you, too good for this life." Her words follow you as you and Anne prepare to meet Jack at the Golden Hind. Too good for this life. But what other options exist for women alone in a world built for men with money? The gin trade, dangerous as it is, offers one of the few paths to independence. Before leaving, you give Mrs. Cooper the remainder of the bottle and a few coins from what Jack provided yesterday. It won't save her, but it might make her final days more comfortable. "We'll come say goodbye before we leave London, you promise, though you're not sure she'll still be alive by then." Consumption moves quickly in the damp, crowded conditions of St. Giles. The morning is grey and drizzling as you make your way back to the Golden Hind. London seems to be weeping, its buildings hunched against the persistent rain, its people scurrying with heads down and shoulders hunched. "I won't miss this weather," Anne comments, pulling her shawl tighter. "Perhaps Bristol will be sunnier, or at least different," you reply. "After a lifetime in London's smoke and stench, any change might be welcome." Jack is already waiting when you arrive, ensconced in the same corner table but without his entourage today. He's dressed more soberly than yesterday, his flashy gold strings and silver-threaded waistcoat replaced by plainer clothes. "Decided?" he asks without preamble as you sit across from him. "Yes," Anne says firmly. "We'll go to Bristol, but we need details. How we'll get there, where we'll stay, what exactly you expect from us in return for your help." Jack grins, clearly pleased. "Straight to business. I like that." He leans forward, lowering his voice. "Here's what I propose. I'll arrange passage on a merchant coach leaving tomorrow night. You'll travel as sisters, returning to your family in Bristol after seeking work in London. I'll provide papers, if anyone asks." "Forged papers?" Anne asks with a frown. "Let's call them creatively acquired," Jack suggests. "Once in Bristol, you'll stay at the Blue Anchor Inn for a week. I'll cover that cost. The innkeeper's wife, Martha, knows you're coming. She'll help you find more permanent lodgings. And in return," you press. Jack's expression turns more serious. "I ship spirits to Bristol regularly. Good quality Dutch gin and French brandy, among other things. I need someone there who knows the difference between proper gin and the rubbish most people sell. Someone who can verify what arrives is what was sent, who can deal with local buyers." "You're asking us to work with smuggled spirits," Anne says flatly. Jack shrugs. "Imported without troubling the customs men. Yes, just like half the gin in London. It's less risky than what you've been doing and more profitable." He has a point. Selling uncustomed spirits carries penalties, but they're less severe than those for illegal distilling. And being the receivers rather than the smugglers themselves puts a layer of protection between you and the most dangerous part of the trade. "What's our cut?" you ask, thinking practically. 20% of profits on what you handle, Jack offers, and you can use the connections to build your own business on the side. Just don't compete directly with my interests. It's a generous arrangement by Jack's standards. You glance at Anne, who gives a slight nod. "We'll need start-up money," you say. "Beyond just the coach fare and inn, enough to establish ourselves properly." Jack considers this. "I can advance you £20 against future earnings, but you'll need to leave collateral." "What kind of collateral?" Anne asks suspiciously. "The remaining gin bottles from Lady Jenkins. And this." Jack produces a folded paper from his pocket. "A written agreement that you'll work for me for at least 6 months or return the advance with interest." It's a binding arrangement, but not an unfair one. Jack is taking a risk too, after all. "We'll need supplies as well," you add. "Basic distilling equipment, botanicals, to establish our business." "I can arrange that too," Jack agrees. "Have them sent on the next shipment after you're settled, but that will be deducted from your advance." You and Anne exchange looks, silently assessing the offer. It's not perfect, but it's a path forward, away from the immediate danger in London. "We agree," Anne says finally, "but we want half the advance now, the rest when we reach Bristol." Jack smiles appreciatively at her negotiating. "Done." He produces a small pouch of coins from his coat. £10 now. Instructions for the coach are here. He slides a folded note across the table. "Be at the White Hart on Fleet Street by 8 tomorrow evening. The driver's name is Silas. He knows to expect you." As you pocket the money and instructions, Jack adds, "One more thing. There's a package I need delivered to Bristol immediately. Too valuable to trust to regular shipment. You'll carry it with you." Anne's eyes narrow. "What kind of package?" "Nothing dangerous," Jack assures her. "Just papers, business documents that need to reach my partner in Bristol quickly and discreetly." You're skeptical. Jack rarely deals in anything completely innocent, but carrying papers is a minor risk compared to everything else you're facing. "Fine," you agree. "Where do we get this package?" "I'll bring it to the coach tomorrow," Jack says, "along with your remaining advance and some travelling provisions. Wear your respectable clothes if you still have them. Coaches are watched sometimes." With the arrangements made, Jack rises to leave. "One last drink before I go," he suggests, signalling the serving girl for gin rather than the ale that's the tavern's primary offering. The girl brings 3 small glasses of surprisingly decent gin. Jack raises his in a toast to new beginnings and old partnerships renewed. You drink, the familiar warmth spreading through your chest. For better or worse, gin has shaped your destiny once again. After Jack leaves, you and Anne remain at the table, processing the enormity of what you've just committed to, leaving London, the only home either of you has ever known, for an uncertain future in a strange city. "Are we doing the right thing?" you ask quietly. Anne sighs, turning her empty glass in her fingers. I don't know if it's right, but it seems necessary. London's too dangerous now, and perhaps, she hesitates, perhaps it's time for something different, a new start. Her words echo your own thoughts. For all its familiarity, London has never been kind to either of you. Its opportunities have always come with steep prices, danger, degradation, the constant fear of arrest, or worse. We should use some of the advance to buy supplies, you suggest. Food for the journey, a change of clothes, something for Mrs. Cooper. Anne nods agreement. And we should retrieve my jewellery from its hiding place. It's not much, but it's security if things go wrong in Bristol. The practical considerations of your impending departure give structure to the uncertainty. With plans to make and preparations to complete, the fear and doubt have less room to grow. You leave the Golden Hind and head toward the market districts where you can purchase necessities without attracting too much attention. The rain has eased to a fine mist that hangs in the air, neither fully present nor absent, much like your current state between Londoners and travellers. The markets are busy despite the weather. You buy sturdy boots for the journey. Your current ones would fall apart before reaching Bristol. Some preserved foods that will travel well, a small knife that can serve multiple purposes, and warmer clothes for both of you. With each purchase, your new future becomes more real, more tangible. We should get something for Mrs. Cooper's cough, Anne suggests as you pass an apothecary's shop. I know a mixture of honey, lemon, and certain herbs that might ease her breathing, at least. The kindness surprises and touches you. Anne has known Mrs. Cooper for barely a day, yet shows more compassion than many who've lived alongside the dying woman for years. Inside the apothecaries, the familiar scents of dried herbs and chemical preparations remind you of Anne's still room. The proprietor, a thin man with spectacles perched on a prominent nose, reminds you vaguely of Mr. Winters, Anne's regular supplier. "Can I help you, ladies?" he asks, eyeing your common clothes with mild suspicion. "We need ingredients for a cough remedy," Anne says, her voice taking on the confident tone she uses with her customers. "Honey, if you have it, lemon essence, horehound, and coltsfoot." The apothecary's demeanour changes subtly at her knowledgeable request. "For consumption, is it?" he asks, more gently. "Yes," Anne admits. "A friend, quite advanced." He nods, understanding, and gathers the requested items, adding a small packet of his own. "Powdered licorice root," he explains. "Mix it with the honey. It soothes the throat and eases breathing. It's a small kindness in a city not known for them, and you thank him sincerely." As you pay, a notice posted by the counter catches your eye. It lists names and descriptions of wanted persons, with rewards offered for information leading to their capture. Your heart nearly stops when you spot Anne's name halfway down the list. Anne Miller, widow, wanted for questioning regarding illegal spirit production and sales, 40 years of age, brown hair, green eyes, last known residence near Covent Garden, reward $5. You manage to maintain your composure, completing the transaction without drawing attention to your shock. Only when you're safely away from the shop do you pull Anne into a quiet alley and show her what you saw. "They've put a price on me," she whispers, face pale. £5 is enough to tempt anyone who recognises me. "We need to be even more careful," you agree, and it confirms we're making the right choice in leaving. The notice adds urgency to your preparations. If Anne's description is posted in shops across London, it's only a matter of time before someone identifies her. Your next stop is Anne's house. Not to enter, but to observe from a distance whether it's still being watched. You approach cautiously from a back street, keeping to shadows and doorways. The house appears quiet, with no obvious signs of constables or surveillance. After watching for nearly an hour from various vantage points, you become reasonably confident it's not under immediate observation. "I need to get inside," Anne says. "My jewellery is hidden where they wouldn't find it, and there are other things we could use for our new start. My recipe book, some small tools for the distilling. It's risky," you caution, "if they return while we're there." "We'll be quick," Anne insists. In through the garden gate, no lights, 10 minutes at most. It's dangerous, but the potential gain makes it worth considering. Anne's recipe book alone would be valuable in establishing your new business in Bristol. You wait until dusk, when the fading light provides some cover but still allows enough visibility to move quickly. The garden gate is locked, but Anne has a hidden key beneath a loose stone in the wall. The house feels different in its emptiness, abandoned, violated by the constable's search. Furniture has been overturned, cupboards left open, floorboards pried up in places. They were thorough in their hunt for evidence. Anne moves with purpose despite the destruction, heading straight for a small recess in the chimney breast, concealed behind a loose brick. From this hiding place she retrieves a cloth bundle that clinks softly as she tucks it into her pocket. "The jewellery," she whispers. "Now, for the recipe book." This proves more challenging. Its hiding place beneath a floorboard in the bedroom has been discovered, the board splintered and the cavity empty. "They found it," Anne says, despair evident in her voice. "All my recipes, my customer lists, everything." The loss is significant, but not catastrophic. "You know the recipes," you remind her. "We can write them down again once we're safe." Anne nods, though her expression remains troubled. "Let's check the still room. Maybe they missed some of the smaller tools. The room where you learned to make proper gin has been completely ransacked. The copper still is gone, along with most of the equipment. But in their haste, the constables overlooked a few items. A small measuring glass hidden inside a hollowed-out book, some filters tucked inside a tea caddy, a notebook with botanical information disguised as a household ledger." "Better than nothing," Anne says, gathering these treasures into a small bag. "We should go before our luck runs out." As if summoned by her words, you hear the front door rattle. Someone is trying to enter the house. You freeze, exchanging panicked glances with Anne. There's no time to reach the garden door without being seen. The only option is to hide and hope whoever it is doesn't search thoroughly. Anne pulls you into a small linen cupboard just as the front door opens. Through a crack, you can see a lantern's glow illuminating the hallway. A constable's voice calls out, "Check upstairs first. The magistrate wants any additional evidence before the house is sealed." They're back to search again, more thoroughly this time. Your hiding place won't remain secure for long. "The window," Anne mouths, pointing to a small window at the end of the hallway that opens onto the roof of the kitchen extension. It's a tight fit and a drop of nearly 10 feet to the garden below, but it's your only chance. As the constables clatter up the front stairs, you and Anne slip from the cupboard and move silently toward the window. Anne works the latch while you keep watch, heart pounding so loudly you're certain they must hear it. The window opens with a squeak that sounds deafening in the quiet house. You both freeze, but the constables continue their movement upstairs, unaware of your presence below. Anne goes first, squeezing through the narrow opening with difficulty. You hear a soft thud as she lands on the ground below. You follow, finding the opening even tighter for your broader shoulders. For a terrifying moment, you're stuck, half in and half out of the window, certain you'll be discovered. With a final desperate push, you break free, tumbling less gracefully than Anne onto the hard ground of the garden. Pain shoots through your ankle, but there's no time to assess the damage. Constable voices from inside grow louder. They've heard something. You limp as quickly as possible to the garden gate, Anne supporting you as you move. Behind you, a shout confirms your worst fears. They've spotted your escape. Stop in the name of the law. But you're through the gate now, into the maze of London's back alleys that you know better than any constable. Even with your injured ankle, you and Anne quickly lose your pursuers in the growing darkness. Only when you're certain you're not being followed do you stop to rest. Both of you breathing hard from the exertion and fear. "Are you badly hurt?" Anne asks, examining your ankle in the dim light of a distant street lamp. "Just twisted, I think," you say, testing it gingerly. "I can walk, but not quickly. We need to get back to Mrs. Cooper's," Anne decides. "Rest it tonight, then be ready for the coach tomorrow. We can't miss that departure." The narrow escape has shaken you both, but also strengthened your resolve to leave London. The authorities are clearly determined to make examples of gin sellers, and Anne is now a named target. You make your slow way back to St. Giles, taking care to vary your route and watch for followers. The neighbourhood feels both comfortingly familiar and increasingly dangerous. What if someone has seen Anne's description and recognises her? Mrs. Cooper is awake when you return, her breathing even more laboured than this morning. The Thomas family has gone out, the adults to a gin shop, the children sent to beg or steal, depending on the opportunities they find. "What happened to you?" Mrs. Cooper asks, noting your limp and dishevelled appearance. "Had to run from constables," you explain, sinking gratefully onto a stool. "They came back to Anne's house while we were collecting some things." "Getting more dangerous by the day," Mrs. Cooper observes. "They're cracking down harder than I've ever seen." You prepare the cough remedy from the ingredients purchased earlier, heating water on the small fire and mixing the honey, lemon essence, herbs and licorice powder. The resulting syrup smells pungent but not unpleasant. Mrs. Cooper accepts a spoonful, swallowing with difficulty. "Tastes better than it looks," she comments. "You always were a decent sort, Lizzie. Your mother raised you right before the fever took her." The mention of your mother, dead these 20 years, catches you by surprise. Mrs. Cooper rarely speaks of the past, and you'd forgotten she knew your family before your marriage. "She'd be proud of you," Mrs. Cooper continues, her voice growing drowsy from the combined effects of the remedy and exhaustion. "Making your way, surviving. You're not sure your mother would approve of gin selling as a profession, but the sentiment touches you nonetheless. Survival itself is an achievement in a world as harsh as yours." As Mrs. Cooper drifts into uneasy sleep, you and Anne make final preparations for tomorrow's departure. You sort through your purchases, deciding what to pack and what to leave behind for Mrs. Cooper and the Thomas family. "We should leave them some of the advance," Anne suggests. "They took us in when we had nowhere else to go." You agree, setting aside a few coins. It's not much, but in St. Giles, even a small amount can mean the difference between eating and going hungry. With your ankle propped up and your few possessions organised for quick departure, you finally allow yourself to contemplate what leaving London truly means. This city has been your entire world, its streets and alleys, its sounds and smells, its dangers and occasional mercies. Bristol exists only as a name, a concept, a place on maps you've rarely had reason to study. "Are you afraid?" you ask Anne softly, not wanting to wake Mrs. Cooper. She considers the question seriously. "Yes," she admits, "but I'm more afraid of staying, of ending up in prison, or worse." "Or like Mrs. Cooper," you add, glancing at the sleeping woman whose life has been shortened by poverty and gin as surely as by consumption. "We have a chance for something better," Anne says. "Not easy, not safe, but better. A place where we're not already known to the authorities, where we can apply what we've learned about proper distilling." She's right, you know. London offers nothing now but increasing danger, yet leaving feels like surrender, like admitting the city has defeated you. I thought I'd die here, you confess. Not soon, not young, but eventually. I never imagined being anywhere else. Anne's expression softens. I felt the same after James died. Like London was both my prison and my only possible home. But maybe there's more for us beyond this place. The conversation drifts into speculation about Bristol, what it might look like, how people might speak, whether the air smells of sea salt, as some say. Neither of you has reliable information, just fragments gathered from travellers' tales and rumours. The unknown stretches before you, terrifying and potentially liberating. Eventually, exhaustion overtakes you both. You sleep fitfully on the hard floor, your ankle throbbing and your dreams filled with chases through endless London alleys that somehow lead to the sea. Morning comes too soon, bringing with it the final day of your London life. Mrs. Cooper is worse, barely conscious when you try to give her more of the cough remedy. The Thomas family returns, the adults bleary-eyed from last night's gin, the children hollow-cheeked and hungry. You share the last of your bread with them and explain that you'll be leaving London by evening's coach. Mrs. Thomas looks envious but resigned. Always thought about leaving myself, she admits, but never had the means or the courage. She glances at her husband, passed out on their shared mattress. Too many ties here now. You leave the promised coins with her rather than Mrs. Cooper, suspecting the dying woman might not be able to use them. The rest of the day passes in tense anticipation, each hour bringing your departure closer. You change back into your more respectable clothes, newly purchased or salvaged from your previous life, and pack your few belongings. Late afternoon brings a surprise visitor. Davis from the coffee house, his leather eye patch newly polished for the occasion. Heard you were leaving, he says without preamble. Thought you should know. Constables are watching the main coaching inns. Been asking questions about women matching your descriptions. Your heart sinks. Including the White Hart on Fleet Street? Davis nods grimly. Especially there. It's a main departure point for Bristol and the western routes. This complicates your carefully laid plans. If constables are watching the White Hart, you and Anne could be recognised and arrested before even boarding the coach. Is there any other way to catch the coach? Anne asks. Another inn where it stops before leaving London. Davis considers. It picks up mail at the Crown in Southwark. Driver might take passengers from there too for the right incentive. It's a risk. The driver expects you at the White Hart and Jack will be bringing the remainder of your advance money there, but it's less risky than walking directly into a constable's trap. Thank you, Davis, you say sincerely. We owe you. He shrugs, embarrassed by the gratitude. Just evening the score for that bottle of quality gin. London's gin trade won't be the same without you two. With that oddly formal farewell, he departs. We need to get word to Jack, Anne says urgently. Tell him to meet us at the Crown instead, but there's no easy way to contact him. You don't know where he lives or where he might be at this hour. Your only option is to leave a message at the Golden Hind and hope it reaches him in time. You scribble a note on a scrap of paper. Change of plans, meet at the Crown in Southwark instead, same time, urgent, and give it to the youngest Thomas boy, along with a penny to deliver it to the tavern. Ask for Jack Rann, you instruct him, or leave it with the barman if Jack's not there, but don't tell anyone else what it says or who it's from. The boy nods solemnly, clearly taking the responsibility seriously. He darts off with the energy of youth, weaving through the crowded streets toward the Golden Hind. With that done, all that remains is saying goodbye to Mrs. Cooper. She's awake but barely responsive, her breathing shallow and laboured. You kneel beside her mattress, taking her thin hand in yours. "We're leaving now," you tell her, unsure if she can hear or understand. "Thank you for everything, for taking us in, for your kindness." Her eyelids flutter, and for a moment her gaze focuses on your face. "Be careful," she whispers, her voice barely audible. "Find something better." They might be the last words she ever speaks to anyone. You squeeze her hand gently, throat tight with emotion, then rise to join Anne by the door. The Thomas family gathers to say their own farewells, awkward but genuine wishes for safe travels and better fortunes. You step out into the London evening, the familiar streets of St. Giles already taking on the quality of memory rather than present reality. Your ankle still hurts, but the pain has subsided enough for steady walking. "To the Crown, then," Anne says, adjusting her small bundle of possessions, and hope Jack gets the message. The journey to Southwark takes you across London Bridge, its buildings teetering precariously over the edge like drunks about to fall into the Thames. The river below reflects the last light of day, its surface deceptively peaceful despite the filth and waste it carries. "I'll miss the bridge," Anne comments unexpectedly. "Used to cross it every day as a girl, bringing my father his dinner at the print shop." It's a rare glimpse into her life before widowhood and gin-making, a reminder that everyone in London carries their own history, their own relationship with the city's stones and waters. The Crown Inn stands just beyond the bridge's southern end, a respectable establishment catering to travellers rather than local drinkers. The Bristol coach is already there when you arrive, being loaded with mail sacks and luggage while passengers mill about, saying goodbyes or securing last-minute provisions. You approach the driver, a weathered man with hands like tanned leather. "Are you Silas?" you ask cautiously. He eyes you with professional assessment. "Depends who's asking." "We're supposed to travel to Bristol tonight. Jack Rann made the arrangements, but there's been a change of plan. We were to meet you at the White Hart, but heard constables are watching the coaching inns." Silas's expression doesn't change, but something in his posture relaxes slightly. "Jack's passengers, eh? 2 sisters returning home?" "Yes," Anne confirms, catching on to the agreed cover story. "Our brother is expecting us in Bristol." Silas nods almost imperceptibly. "Extra fee for the change in pickup, 2 shillings. It's highway robbery, but you're in no position to argue. You count out the coins from your advance, which Silas pockets without comment. "We're still waiting for Jack," you explain. "He's bringing something for us and the rest of our fare." Silas checks a large pocket watch. "Leaving in 20 minutes, with or without your friend." Coach waits for no one. With that warning, he returns to his preparations, leaving you and Anne to wait anxiously for Jack's appearance. Minutes tick by, each one increasing the tension between you. What if he doesn't get the message? What if he's been arrested himself? What if the constables followed your messenger boy? Just as the driver begins calling for passengers to board, a familiar figure appears at the edge of the inn yard. Jack, looking harried but present. He spots you and approaches quickly. "Your message nearly missed me," he says without greeting. "Lucky I stopped at the Hind for a last drink." "Constables are watching the White Hart," you explain. "We had to change plans." Jack nods, understanding. "Smart move. Here." He hands you a small pouch. "The rest of your advance, minus what I paid the driver originally, and this." From inside his coat, he produces a sealed packet. "The business documents for my partner in Bristol. Guard them carefully." The packet is smaller than you expected, just a few sheets of paper from the feel of it, but Jack's serious expression underscores its importance to him. "One last thing," he adds, lowering his voice. "My partner's name is William Fraser. He'll find you at the Blue Anchor after you arrive. He can help you get established beyond what we've arranged." "All aboard for Bristol," Silas shouts, cutting through the evening air. "That's your call," Jack says, stepping back. "Safe journey." There's no time for prolonged farewells. You and Anne quickly board the coach, finding seats among the other passengers, a mixture of merchants, a clergyman, and a few women whose purpose for travel isn't immediately obvious. As the coach lurches into motion, you catch a final glimpse of Jack watching from the inn yard, his expression unreadable in the gathering darkness. Then London begins to slip away, street by street, building by building. You're leaving behind the only world you've known, heading toward an uncertain future in a strange city. But as the coach picks up speed and the familiar landmarks recede, you feel something unexpected alongside the fear and doubt, a tentative sense of possibility, of horizons expanding beyond the narrow confines of survival. The gin that has shaped your life thus far travels with you, in the packet from Jack, in Anne's rescued recipe book, in the knowledge you've both accumulated through necessity and practice. But perhaps in Bristol it can become something different, not just a means of barely staying afloat, but a foundation for something more sustainable, more secure. As London's last lights fade behind you and the countryside opens up in darkness ahead, you settle back against the uncomfortable coach seat. Your ankle throbs dully, a reminder of dangers narrowly escaped. Beside you, Anne's face is composed but alert, watching this transition from one life to another with the same careful attention she brings to distilling. The motion of the coach grows rhythmic, almost soothing. Other passengers drift into conversation or silence or sleep as the journey properly begins. Tomorrow will bring Bristol and all its unknown challenges, but tonight, suspended between the London you're leaving and the Bristol you've yet to meet, there is only the road, the darkness, and the possibility of transformation. The Gin-Crazed continues to grip London behind you, its streets flowing with spirits both cheap and dear, its people seeking solace or profit, or both in Madame Geneva's embrace. But your own relationship with gin is changing, evolving into something with potential beyond mere survival. As fields and occasional villages pass in the darkness outside, you feel yourself crossing a threshold more significant than merely leaving London's boundaries. You're moving from desperation to deliberate choice, from reaction to action, and in that transition lies the hope that has sustained Londoners through plague, fire, poverty and gin, the stubborn belief that tomorrow might, against all odds, be better than today. The coach rumbles through the night, its wooden wheels finding every rut and stone in the poorly maintained road. Sleep comes in fitful snatches, interrupted by particularly violent jolts, or the coach stopping to change horses at posting inns along the route. Your fellow passengers are a microcosm of Georgian society. The merchant across from you snores loudly, his substantial belly rising and falling beneath an expensive waistcoat. Next to him, a thin clergyman clutches his Bible even in sleep, his lips occasionally moving in unconscious prayer. Two women who introduce themselves as sisters but share no family resemblance whisper occasionally, their eyes constantly scanning the other passengers with professional assessment. Likely prostitutes travelling to find new markets, you guess. Anne dozes against your shoulder, her face finally peaceful in sleep. The constant vigilance required in London has left little room for true rest, and the motion of the coach, uncomfortable as it is, provides a strange kind of sanctuary. No constables can reach you here, on the road between one life and another. Dawn breaks with pale light filtering through the coach's small windows. The landscape outside has changed from London's crowded outskirts to genuine countryside, rolling hills, scattered farms, the occasional village clustered around a church spire. Never been this far from London, you murmur to Anne as she stirs awake. I went to Bath once as a girl, she replies, straightening and wincing at the stiffness in her neck. My father had a printing job there. It was cleaner. The air smelled different. The coach stops at a posting inn for breakfast, a brief half hour for passengers to stretch cramped limbs, use the necessary house, and consume whatever food the establishment offers. In this case, it's a basic meal of bread, cheese, and ale, but after London's uncertain provisions, it tastes remarkably good. How much longer to Bristol? You ask Silas as he supervises the changing of horses. All day and into evening, he replies shortly. Roads are bad after the rain. Back in the coach, the journey continues. The merchant engages Anne in conversation, having noticed her relatively refined speech compared to yours. Business in Bristol? He inquires with the easy familiarity of those accustomed to making connections wherever they travel. Family, Anne replies with the agreed-upon story. Our brother has established himself there. We're joining his household after trying our fortune in London. Wise decision, the merchant nods. Bristol's a growing port, nearly as much opportunity as London these days, without half the vice. The irony isn't lost on either of you, considering your plans to establish a gin business there, but you keep your expressions neutral, playing the parts of respectable sisters down on their luck, but not their morals. Is there much call for medicinal cordials in Bristol? Anne asks casually. I have some experience in that line. The merchant brightens. Indeed, Bristol society has developed quite a taste for such preparations. My wife swears by her tonics for female complaints. He leans forward conspiratorially. Between us, I believe half the ladies of my acquaintance would perish from nerves without their special cordials. It's exactly what you hoped to hear. Confirmation that the market for disguised gin exists in Bristol just as in London. The basic human desire for escape, for temporary relief from pain or boredom or anxiety, doesn't change with geography. The day passes with the slow rhythm of travel, stopping every 10 to 12 miles to change horses, brief meals at posting inns, conversations that rise and fall among the passengers. The countryside grows more dramatic as you head west, with steeper hills and deeper valleys than the flatlands around London. By late afternoon, the clergyman has engaged you in conversation about the moral state of the capital, unaware of the irony in choosing former gin sellers as his audience. The gin epidemic is nothing short of a plague sent to test our national character, he pronounces, warming to his subject. I've seen children, staggering drunk in the streets of St. Giles. How terrible, you murmur, your face a mask of appropriate concern. The authorities are finally taking proper action, he continues with satisfaction. When I left London, they were conducting raids on illegal distilleries, arrested a widow near Covent Garden who'd been selling gin disguised as medicine to respectable women. Anne stiffens beside you but maintains her composure admirably. How shocking, she says, her voice betraying nothing of her personal connection to this news. The magistrate made an example of her, the clergyman adds. 2 years in the House of Correction, I heard, would have been transportation to the colonies, but she had no prior convictions. Your heart races at this information. 2 years in a House of Correction would be a death sentence for many, especially someone of Anne's age and relatively genteel upbringing. The brutal conditions, the forced labour, the disease. Few emerge unscathed if they emerge at all. You squeeze Anne's hand discreetly, a silent acknowledgement of the fate she's narrowly avoided. Her fingers are cold, despite the warmth of the crowded coach. The conversation eventually turns to other topics, much to your relief. As evening approaches, the first signs of Bristol appear. Increased traffic on the road, more frequent farms and villages, and finally the smell of salt water and tar that marks a working port. Bristol, Silas announces unnecessarily as the coach crests a hill, providing your first view of the city. It's smaller than London, certainly, but still substantial. A proper city spread along both sides of a river, with ships crowding the harbour and church spires punctuating the skyline. The buildings are a mix of ancient and modern timber-framed structures alongside newer stone edifices. Smoke rises from countless chimneys, but the air seems clearer than London's perpetual smog. "It's beautiful," Anne says softly, genuine wonder in her voice. Beauty isn't a quality you've associated with cities before. London has many qualities: power, opportunity, danger, history, but beauty isn't foremost among them. Yet Bristol, with its harbour reflecting the last light of day, and its buildings climbing the hills that surround it, does possess a certain unexpected beauty. The coach makes its way down into the city proper, navigating streets narrower than London's main thoroughfares but wider than its alleys. The Blue Anchor Inn, your destination, sits near the harbour, a substantial stone building with a freshly painted sign showing a blue anchor against a white background. "End of the line," Silas calls as the coach comes to a stop in the inn yard. "Bristol Blue Anchor Inn." Stiff and exhausted from the journey, you and Anne collect your few belongings and descend from the coach. The harbour air hits you immediately. Salt, fish, tar, and the indefinable scent of places where many peoples and goods mix. It's not unlike the Thames, but somehow fresher, less corrupted. "You must be Anne and Elizabeth," a woman's voice calls from the inn doorway. She's middle-aged and solid, with a practical apron over her dress and keys jingling at her waist. "Jack's friends from London. I'm Martha, the innkeeper's wife. He said to expect you." Her matter-of-fact greeting is reassuring after the uncertainties of your journey. Martha leads you inside, through a common room busy with sailors and merchants, and up a narrow staircase to a small but clean chamber with 2 beds. "It's yours for the week, as arranged," she explains. "Meals included, chamber pot under the bed, necessary house in the yard. We serve breakfast at 7, dinner at noon, supper at 6, though you've missed that today. Is there anything to eat now?" you ask, suddenly aware of your hunger. Martha's expression softens slightly. "I'll have the girl bring up bread and cheese and a pot of tea. You look done in, the pair of you." When she's gone, you and Anne sink onto the beds, the reality of your situation finally settling in. You've actually done it. Left London, travelled to a new city, begun a new chapter. "We made it," Anne says quietly, looking around the simple room as if it were a palace. "I half expected constables to stop the coach at every inn." "We're not safe yet," you remind her, practical as always. "We still need to meet Jack's partner, establish ourselves, find permanent lodgings." "But we're not in London anymore," Anne points out. "Not where everyone knows my name and face. That's something." She has a point. In Bristol, you're strangers, unremarkable newcomers rather than known gin sellers with prices on your heads. It's a kind of freedom neither of you has experienced in years. A serving girl brings the promised food: fresh bread still warm from the oven, a wedge of firm local cheese, and tea that smells like actual tea leaves rather than the twice-brewed dregs common in London's cheaper establishments. "Lord above," Anne sighs after her first bite. "I'd forgotten what proper bread tastes like." You eat in appreciative silence, savouring food untainted by London's grime and the fear that has flavoured every meal for weeks. When you're finished, exhaustion overtakes you both. You manage to remove only your outer garments before collapsing onto the beds, asleep almost instantly. Morning comes with unfamiliar sounds, seagulls crying, ship's bells ringing, sailors calling to each other in accents different from London's rough cadences. For a disorienting moment, you can't place where you are. Then memory returns. Bristol, the Blue Anchor Inn. Your escape from London's dangers. Anne is already up, washing her face in the basin by the window. "It's nearly 7, she says, noticing you're awake. "Breakfast soon, and William Fraser is supposed to find us here today." You dress quickly, smoothing your travel-rumpled clothes as best you can. The serving girl brings fresh water, and you both make efforts to appear respectable despite your limited resources. First impressions with Jack's partner could determine your future prospects. Breakfast exceeds expectations. Porridge with actual honey, bread with butter, even a small piece of cold ham each. The common room is busy with travellers and locals alike, creating a convenient anonymity. No one pays particular attention to two women sharing a quiet meal in the corner. "What do you think Fraser will be like?" you ask Anne between bites. Hard to say. Jack's associates range from nearly respectable merchants to outright criminals. Fraser could be either or somewhere in between. You're about to respond when the inn's door opens and a tall man enters, pausing to survey the room with the air of someone searching for specific faces. He's perhaps 50, with the weathered complexion of someone who spends time outdoors, but the clothes of a businessman rather than a labourer. His eyes find you and Anne in your corner, and after a moment's assessment, he approaches. "Mrs. Miller? Miss Bowman?" he inquires in a voice with the faintest trace of Scottish accent. "William Fraser, Jack's associate. May I join you?" You gesture to the empty chair at your table, studying him as he sits. He doesn't match any of the mental images you'd formed. Neither the rough smuggler nor the oily merchant you'd half expected. Instead, he has the straightforward manner of someone accustomed to direct dealings. Jack sends his regards, Fraser continues once seated, and hopes your journey was uneventful. As uneventful as coach travel can be, Anne replies carefully. You received word of our arrival? Fraser nods. Jack has ways of sending messages faster than the mail coach. I understand you're looking to establish yourselves in Bristol's medicinal cordial trade. The euphemism confirms he understands the real nature of your business. With the right connections and supplies, you agree, we have experience, knowledge, and some capital to begin. And Jack's package? Fraser asks, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. You reach into your bodice and extract the sealed packet entrusted to you in London. Fraser accepts it with a nod of thanks, checking the seal before tucking it inside his coat. Now, to your situation, he says, all business. Bristol has opportunities for those with your skills, but the market is different from London, more dispersed, less desperate. Quality matters more than quantity here. That aligns with our approach, Anne tells him. We specialise in proper gin, not the adulterated street variety. Real juniper, proper distillation, safe ingredients. Fraser looks pleased. Excellent. Bristol's growing merchant class has developed a taste for quality spirits, but discreetly supplied. The moral reformers are active here too, though less hysterical than in London. We need premises, you say practically. Somewhere to live and work that won't attract unwanted attention. I've taken the liberty of identifying several possibilities, Fraser replies. We can view them today if you're rested enough from your journey. The man's efficiency is impressive. Either Jack's message reached him well in advance of your arrival, or he's accustomed to making rapid arrangements for business associates. What's your interest in this? Anne asks directly. Jack mentioned a partnership, but not the details. Fraser smiles slightly, appreciating the straightforward question. I import various goods through Bristol port, some through official channels, others less so. I need reliable people to receive certain shipments, process them correctly, and distribute them to the right customers. In return, I provide protection, connections, and a share of the profits. Smuggled gin, you translate. Among other spirits, Fraser acknowledges without concern, Dutch Geneva, French brandy, Caribbean rum, all heavily taxed when imported legally, all in high demand. Your role would be receiving these spirits, ensuring quality, improving them when necessary, and packaging them for discreet local sale. It's similar to Jack's original proposal, but hearing it from Fraser gives it more concrete shape. You and Anne exchange glances, silently assessing the opportunity and its risks. We need to establish our own business as well, Anne says firmly, not just work for you and Jack. Of course, Fraser agrees readily. In fact, a legitimate business provides excellent cover for our other arrangements. A small distillery producing medicinal cordials for ladies would be perfect, respectable on the surface, profitable on its own, and an ideal front for our more lucrative imports. The plan makes sense, combining your gin-making skills with Fraser's smuggling operation in a way that offers more security than your London business ever had. The risks still exist. Smuggling carries heavy penalties, but they seem more manageable in this new context. When can we see these premises you mentioned, you ask, making your decision? Fraser stands immediately. No time like the present. I have a carriage waiting. The next few hours pass in a whirlwind of activity. Fraser's carriage takes you to several properties around Bristol, each with different advantages and drawbacks. The first is too close to the harbour, too visible to customs officers. The second is too far from your potential customers. The third is promising, a small house with an attached workshop in an area inhabited by respectable artisans and minor merchants. The previous occupant was an apothecary, Fraser explains as you tour the space. Moved to Bath for his health, the workshop is already set up with appropriate benches, shelves, even a small furnace for heating preparations. Perfect for distilling, Anne murmurs, examining the space with professional assessment. We'd need to add a proper still, of course, but the basic setup is ideal. And living quarters, you ask? Practical as always. Upstairs, 2 bedchambers, a small parlour, a kitchen, modest but comfortable. The rent is higher than you'd hoped, but manageable with your advance from Jack, especially once you begin generating income. After consulting with Anne, you agree to take it, beginning immediately. Excellent, Fraser says, producing papers already prepared. I took the liberty of securing a 3-month option on the property, pending your approval. Here's the lease. You sign with the name Elizabeth Bowman, feeling a strange mixture of apprehension and hope as your pen moves across the paper. This is commitment to Bristol, to this new venture, to a life beyond London's familiar dangers. Fraser hands you the keys with a small bow. Welcome to Bristol, ladies. I believe our arrangement will prove mutually beneficial. The rest of the day passes in practical arrangements. Fraser provides an initial inventory of equipment and supplies needed for both your legitimate cordial business and the less official spirit imports. You and Anne make lists, calculate costs, and plan the layout of your new workshop. By evening, you've returned to the Blue Anchor to collect your few belongings and inform Martha of your change in circumstances. Found lodgings already? She says with raised eyebrows. Mr. Fraser works quickly, doesn't he? Well, I'm not surprised. Jack said you were capable women. "You know Jack well?" Anne asks curiously. Martha's expression turns wry. "Known him since he was a skinny pickpocket working the Bristol docks, before he moved to London and got fancy. We do business together occasionally. Bristol and London have always been connected by more than just the road." This casual revelation of Jack's Bristol origins surprises you. He's always seemed so quintessentially London, with his flashy clothes and cocky manner. The idea that he began in Bristol, perhaps not so different from the street children you passed daily in St Giles, adds unexpected dimension to his character. "Will you be working with Mr Fraser then?" Martha asks, her tone casual but her eyes shrewd. "We'll have our own business," you reply carefully. "But yes, with some connection to Mr Fraser's imports." Martha nods, asking no further questions, but conveying understanding nonetheless. In port cities like Bristol, the line between legitimate trade and smuggling is often thin, and many respectable businesses have one foot on either side. "If you need anything, you know where to find me," she says simply. Bristol takes care of its own once you're established, not like London, where everyone's ready to inform on their neighbour for a few shillings. Her words are heartening, a suggestion that Bristol might indeed offer the fresh start you're seeking, with a community less fractured by desperation than London's. You spend one more night at the Blue Anchor, both of you too exhausted by the day's events to move immediately to your new lodgings. Tomorrow will be soon enough to begin setting up your business and home. In the quiet of evening, with Bristol's harbour sounds filtering through the window, you and Anne allow yourselves to acknowledge what you've accomplished, escaping London's immediate dangers, travelling to a new city, securing lodgings and business prospects within a day of arrival. "It feels almost too easy," you confess, voicing the concern that's been nagging at you. "After everything in London was so difficult, so dangerous." "Not easy," Anne corrects, "just different. We have advantages here. Jack's connection to Fraser, our combined knowledge, a smaller city with different patterns of enforcement, and we're not starting from absolute poverty this time." She's right, of course. Your situation in Bristol isn't miraculous. It's the result of specific circumstances, connections, and the capital you managed to bring with you. But after years of struggling merely to survive in London, even these modest advantages feel significant. "Do you think we can make it work?" you ask, allowing your uncertainty to show. "The legitimate business and Fraser's smuggling?" Anne considers the question seriously. "I think so, yes. We've learned from London how to be discreet, how to manage quality, how to find and keep the right customers, and Bristol seems less desperate than London, less gin-soaked, if that makes sense." It does make sense. Even in your brief exposure to Bristol, you've noticed the difference. There are gin shops here, certainly, and no doubt areas where poverty drives people to seek oblivion in cheap spirits, but the city doesn't feel saturated with gin the way London does, where every street corner seems to offer penny glasses of forgetfulness. "We'll need to learn Bristol's patterns," you muse. "Who drinks what, where, when, which authorities can be trusted, which avoided, who might inform on us, who might become allies." "Just like we did in London," Anne agrees, "but with a fresh slate. No one knows us here. We're just two sisters starting a small cordial business." The anonymity is perhaps the greatest luxury of all, the ability to walk down a street without checking over your shoulder, to conduct business without the weight of past associations and suspicions. In London, you were always Elizabeth the gin seller from St Giles, Anne the widow who sold tonics to respectable ladies. Here, you can define yourselves anew. As night deepens and Bristol quiets, you find yourself listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this new city, the creak of ships' timbers in the harbour, the different rhythm of voices in the street below, the absence of London's constant background roar, different but not unwelcoming. "Whatever happens," Anne says softly from her bed, already half asleep, "we're not in London anymore. That's something to be grateful for." Indeed it is. As sleep claims you, your dreams are not of London's dangers, but of Bristol's possibilities. A small shop with bottles of properly made gin disguised as ladies' cordials, a living earned through skill rather than desperate measures, perhaps even some measure of security in this new place. Morning comes with renewed energy and purpose. After a substantial breakfast at the Blue Anchor, you and Anne bid farewell to Martha and make your way to your new lodgings. The house looks different in morning light, more real, more full of potential. "Home," Anne says simply as you unlock the door. The space is dusty from disuse but fundamentally sound. The workshop will need the most modification to serve your purposes, but the living quarters are immediately habitable with some cleaning. You spend the morning taking inventory of what exists and what you'll need to acquire, making lists and plans with the practical focus of women accustomed to building something from nothing. Mid-afternoon brings a knock at the door. Fraser, accompanied by a cart and two sturdy men carrying crates. "Housewarming gifts," he announces with a small smile, "some essentials to get you started." The crates contain basic furnishings for the house, bedding, cookware, a few pieces of simple furniture, and initial supplies for the workshop, including the small copper still he promised. It's not as fine as the one Anne had in London, but it's serviceable and, most importantly, legitimate on the surface. A proper license for distilling medicinal preparations is included among the papers Fraser provides. Everything in order, he assures you. Purchased from a retiring cordial maker in Bath, you are now officially in the business of producing ladies' tonics and healthful spirits. The legitimacy feels strange after years of working in London's shadows. Even Anne's tonic business there existed in a grey area, unlicensed and vulnerable. Here, you have official permission for at least the surface level of your trade. "And the other business?" you ask quietly once the workmen have departed. "The first shipment arrives in 3 days, Fraser informs you. Dutch Geneva of excellent quality, though it will benefit from your expertise to make it truly superior. 10 cases initially, with more to follow if all goes well." The scale is larger than you anticipated. 10 cases would have been a fortune's worth in London, where you dealt in bottles and glasses rather than bulk shipments. But Fraser operates at a different level, with connections to ships' captains and international suppliers, rather than local distillers. "How is it delivered?" Anne asks, always focused on practical details. "My men will bring it after dark through the alley entrance to your workshop. They're experienced and discreet. Your job is to check quality, rebottle if necessary, and prepare it for distribution to my regular customers. I'll provide the list and arrangements." It all sounds well organised, professional in a way your London operations never quite achieved. Fraser clearly runs a tight operation, with each person playing a specific role in a larger system. As Fraser takes his leave, promising to return the next day with additional supplies, you and Anne survey your new domain with a mixture of apprehension and excitement. The workshop, once cleaned and arranged, will serve both your legitimate cordial business and Fraser's smuggling operation. The house above offers more space and comfort than either of you has enjoyed in years. "It's really happening," you say, half to yourself. "We're starting over." Anne nods, her expression thoughtful. Not just surviving anymore, building something. That distinction feels important. The shift from day-to-day existence to longer-term planning, from reaction to intention. For so long, both your lives have been shaped by immediate necessities and dangers. Now perhaps you can begin to shape them yourselves. The rest of the day passes in cleaning and organising, transforming the dusty rooms into a functional home and workspace. By evening, exhausted but satisfied, you sit at your own table in your own kitchen, sharing a simple meal purchased from a nearby cook shop. "To Bristol," Anne proposes, raising her cup of cider. "And new beginnings." "To Bristol," you echo, touching your cup to hers. "And gin without constables." The cider is sweet and strong, nothing like London's watered-down offerings. Like everything in Bristol so far, it suggests possibilities beyond what you've known before, a life where quality might matter more than mere survival, where gin might be craft rather than just commerce. As night settles over your new city, you find yourself wondering what London is doing without you. The gin shops will still be open, the constables still making their raids, the moral reformers still giving their speeches. The great machine of the capital grinds on, indifferent to the absence of two more gin sellers among its thousands. But here in Bristol, in this small house with its attached workshop, something new has begun. Not an escape from gin, that spirit will still shape your lives and livelihoods, but perhaps a more balanced relationship with it. Not abandonment of the past, but a chance to apply its lessons in a different context. The gin craze that gripped London and drove both your fates has followed you to Bristol, but in a form you might be able to master rather than merely survive, and in that possibility lies hope more potent than any spirit. 6 months pass in Bristol with a rhythm entirely different from your London existence. The days blend together not in desperate sameness, but in steady progress, each one building slightly on the one before. Your workshop has transformed from the dusty space you first entered to a proper distillery, small but well-equipped, with Anne's copper still as its centrepiece. The shelves hold neatly labelled jars of botanicals, real juniper berries, not turpentine, coriander seeds, and angelica root, dried citrus peel, and various herbs. No oil of vitriol or other dangerous adulterants in sight. The business operates on 2 tracks, just as planned. By day, you produce Mrs. Miller's restorative cordials, a range of gin-based preparations packaged in elegant bottles with handwritten labels promising relief for various feminine complaints. By night, you receive Fraser's imported spirits, testing, sometimes redistilling, and packaging them for his network of customers. Both sides of the business have proven profitable beyond your initial expectations. Bristol's respectable ladies have embraced Anne's cordials with enthusiasm, creating a steady stream of legitimate income, and Fraser's smuggling operation provides substantial additional earnings without the constant fear of arrest that characterised your London trade. Another order from Mrs. Pembroke, Anne announces one autumn morning, reading a note delivered by a maid in neat livery. Her usual monthly supply plus extra for her sister visiting from London. You look up from the account book you're maintaining, another new aspect of your more organised business. That's the 3rd extra bottle this month. Word seems to be spreading among the visitors. Good news for business, Anne notes, adding the order to her list. Though I hope not too good. We don't want London-style attention. That's always the balance. Enough success to prosper, but not so much as to attract unwanted scrutiny. So far, you've managed it well. The local authorities seem less concerned with gin than their London counterparts, focusing more on smuggled tea and tobacco than spirits, and your legitimate business provides excellent cover for the other activities. "Fraser's coming tonight?" you ask, returning to the accounts. Anne nods. "With the new shipment from Amsterdam, he mentioned bringing a visitor, someone from London he thinks we should meet." A visitor from London sends a brief chill through you, a reflexive caution that never entirely fades despite months of relative security. Did he say who? No, just that it's someone who could expand our business connections. Anne's expression shows she shares your wariness. "Fraser knows our situation. I don't think he'd bring anyone who might cause problems." You hope she's right. Fraser has proven reliable so far, his operation professional and secure, but London connections always carry risk, especially given the price that might still be on Anne's head. The day passes in familiar productivity. You prepare a batch of feminine restorative tonic, essentially a well-made gin infused with raspberry leaf and chamomile, bottled and labelled for delivery to your growing list of respectable customers. Anne works on a special order for the wife of a prominent merchant who prefers her cordial stronger than most with additional juniper and less herbal disguise. By evening, the workshop is ready for Fraser's delivery. The legitimate work is cleared away, the still cleaned after the day's production, and space made for the incoming shipment. You've developed an efficient system over the months. Receive, inspect, process when necessary, and prepare for distribution, all without leaving evidence that might compromise either Fraser or yourselves. Fraser arrives after dark, as always, his cart moving quietly through the alley to your back entrance. But tonight, as Anne mentioned, he's not alone. A second figure walks beside him, face shadowed by a fashionable hat. You open the workshop door cautiously, lantern held low to avoid casting light too far. Fraser enters first, followed by his companion who, stepping into the workshop's dim illumination, is revealed as a woman rather than the business associate you expected. "Elizabeth, Anne," Fraser greets you with his usual reserved manner. "May I present Mrs. Rebecca Hodgson, recently of London." The woman removes her hat, revealing a handsome face in its early 40s, with shrewd eyes and an assessing gaze. "So you're Jack's London associates," she says, her accent refined but with underlying Cockney vowels that suggest humble origins. "I've heard interesting things about your operation here." "Mrs. Hodgson is a business partner of mine," Fraser explains. "She manages several establishments in London that serve our imported spirits and is considering expanding to Bristol." "What kind of establishments?" Anne asks directly. Mrs. Hodgson smiles, appreciating the straightforwardness. "Gin shops, my dear. Licensed, respectable ones. No penny glasses or Puss and Mew operations. Quality establishments serving quality spirits at prices that ensure a better class of customer." The concept is familiar from your London days, the attempt to elevate gin consumption from desperate street drinking to something more controlled and socially acceptable. Henry at the Dark Horse had a similar approach. Bristol already has gin shops, you point out. What makes yours different? "Mine don't look like gin shops at all," Mrs. Hodgson replies with obvious pride. "They're tea rooms, ladies' establishments where one can order a dish of tea and, if one knows how to ask, something stronger served discreetly in teapots and cups. No drunkenness, no disorder, just gentle oblivion for those who seek it." It's a clever approach, capitalizing on the social acceptability of tea rooms to provide cover for gin consumption. In class-conscious Georgian society, appearances matter enormously, and Mrs. Hodgson has found a way to make gin respectable by changing its context. "I'm opening my first Bristol establishment next month," she continues, "and I need a reliable source of quality gin. William speaks highly of your product and discretion." Fraser, who rarely shows emotion, looks pleased by this development. Mrs. Hodgson's business aligns perfectly with ours, he explains. Her tea rooms provide an ideal outlet for our spirits, with minimal risk and maximum profit. The prospect is intriguing. A steady, secure customer for your gin, both the properly imported kind and your own distilled product. But something still bothers you. How did you connect with Fraser, you ask Mrs. Hodgson. Through Jack? In a manner of speaking, she replies with a small smile. Jack and I have history. We were childhood friends in Bristol before he moved to London, and I married Mr. Hodgson. This revelation shifts your understanding of the connection. Not just business associates, but people with shared history, shared origins. It explains Fraser's willingness to bring her to your carefully guarded operation. Mr. Hodgson left this world 5 years ago, she continues matter-of-factly, left me his public house near Covent Garden, which I've since transformed into my first tea room. It's been so successful that I've opened 3 more across London, each more profitable than the last. And you've avoided the constables? Anne asks, understandably focused on this aspect given her narrow escape. Mrs. Hodgson's expression turns knowing. The tea room concept provides excellent protection. Respectable women drinking tea is hardly suspicious, and I maintain good relationships with the local authorities. Gifts at Christmas, the occasional free meal, employment for their relatives when possible, makes them disinclined to look too closely at what's in those teapots. It's a more sophisticated approach than anything you attempted in London, where you were always reacting to crackdowns rather than preventing them through strategic relationship building. As you discuss potential business arrangements, Fraser's men unload the shipment. Crates of Dutch Geneva and French brandy carefully disguised as imports of linen and dried goods. The routine is familiar now, each person knowing their role in the efficient system. Later, after Fraser and Mrs. Hodgson depart with agreements in place for you to supply her new Bristol tea room, you and Anne sit in your small parlour above the workshop, contemplating this new development. It's a good opportunity, Anne says, pouring small glasses of your own gin. Not the rough spirit of London days, but something refined, smooth, made with care and proper ingredients. Steady custom, reduced risk compared to multiple smaller buyers. If we can trust her, you add, still cautious when it comes to London connections. Fraser trusts her, Anne points out, and he's been reliable so far. She's right. In the month since arriving in Bristol, Fraser has proven himself a careful, honest business partner. His smuggling operation runs with precision and discretion, and he's never failed to pay what was promised or protect your mutual interests. It's strange, you muse, sipping your gin and appreciating its clean juniper flavour. In London, we were always just trying to survive. Here, we're actually building something. Anne nods thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that, about the difference between London's gin trade and what we're doing here. What do you mean? In London, gin is desperation, Anne explains, choosing her words carefully. It's escape, oblivion, momentary relief from unbearable conditions. Here it's something else. Still alcohol, still potentially harmful, but consumed differently, with different purpose. It's an insightful observation. You've noticed it too, the difference between St. Giles's gin-soaked squalor and Bristol's more measured relationship with spirits. People still drink here, sometimes heavily, but there's less of the frantic quality that characterised London's consumption. Mrs. Hodgson's tea room model is part of that, you realise. It changes gin from something gulped in desperate privacy or chaotic public drunkenness to a social activity with built-in limitations. Exactly, Anne agrees. Not perfect, certainly not harmless, but perhaps less destructive. The conversation drifts to plans for expanding production to meet Mrs. Hodgson's orders while maintaining your existing business. The additional income will allow improvements to both the workshop and your living quarters, perhaps even hiring an assistant for the legitimate side of the business. As you talk, you're struck by how different these conversations are from your London days when planning rarely extended beyond tomorrow's survival. Now you discuss investments, expansions, even the possibility of eventually owning your premises rather than renting. Later, preparing for bed in your small but comfortable chamber, you catch sight of yourself in the looking glass and pause, suddenly aware of how much has changed. Your face has filled out, the perpetual strain softened. Your clothes, while still modest, are of better quality than anything you wore in London. Your hands, once rough and chapped, show the effects of easier living and less desperate work. You're not wealthy, may never be, but you're secure in ways that once seemed impossible. Food on the table, a roof that doesn't leak, work that offers satisfaction beyond mere survival, and all still connected to gin, the spirit that nearly destroyed you in London but has become your means of security in Bristol. The next morning brings a letter from London, a rare occurrence that immediately puts you on alert. It's addressed to Anne in unfamiliar handwriting, and she opens it with visible apprehension. It's from Mrs. Winthrop, she says with surprise, reading quickly. "My former customer." She says, "Oh, what is it?" you ask, concerned by her expression. "Mrs. Cooper died," Anne says quietly, 3 days after we left London. "The consumption took her," she continues reading, "and there have been more gin raids. They arrested Henry from the Dark Horse. His licence was revoked for serving outside permitted hours. The news from London feels distant now, almost like hearing about a foreign country. Yet these were people who shaped your lives, whose fates might easily have been yours had you remained." Mrs. Winthrop also says Jack was questioned by constables but released without charge, and continues, "Apparently he claimed to have no knowledge of my whereabouts or activities. Loyal of him," you observe, somewhat surprised. Jack has never struck you as the type to protect others at his own risk. "Self-interest, more likely," Anne suggests with a small smile. "If he'd admitted to helping us leave London, he might have been charged as an accessory." True enough, Jack's assistance always comes with calculation rather than altruism, but whatever his motives, his arrangements have given you both a fresh start beyond London's dangers. The letter concludes with news of continuing crackdowns on gin sellers across London, though Mrs. Winthrop notes that consumption hardly seems affected, merely driven further underground with prices rising accordingly. The gin craze continues unabated despite all attempts to control it. You spend the morning in your usual routines, preparing cordials, bottling the previous day's distillation, reviewing orders for delivery, but the letter from London adds a reflective quality to your work, a heightened awareness of the journey that brought you here. "Do you ever miss it?" you ask Anne as you label bottles together at the workshop table. "London, I mean." She considers the question seriously, her hands continuing their practiced movements. "Not the fear," she finally says, "not the constant hiding and watching for constables, but sometimes I miss the energy of it, that feeling that you're at the centre of the world, even if it's a dangerous centre." You understand what she means. Bristol has many qualities: beauty, opportunity, relative safety, but it lacks London's intensity, that sense of being where history happens, where everything is larger, faster, more consequential. "But I prefer this," Anne adds firmly. "Building something sustainable rather than just surviving day to day, having some control over our fates rather than being at the mercy of informers and raids." Again, you share her sentiment. The gin trade nearly destroyed you both in London, yet has become your path to security in Bristol. Same spirit, different relationship. That evening, Fraser returns to discuss specific arrangements for supplying Mrs. Hodgson's tea room. The business details are quickly settled: quantities, delivery schedules, payment terms, and the conversation turns to broader matters. "Have you heard about the new Gin Act they're proposing in Parliament?" Fraser asks, accepting a glass of your own distillation with appreciation. "Another one?" Anne asks with weary familiarity. "How many does this make?" "5 major acts since 1729, Fraser replies, each attempting to control what cannot be controlled. The English thirst for gin. "What's different about this one?" you ask, curious despite your distance from London's concerns. "It takes a more moderate approach," Fraser explains. "Rather than prohibition or punitive measures, it aims to improve quality by making licenses more accessible to respectable sellers while increasing penalties for the worst abuses." It sounds like a more rational approach than previous attempts, which oscillated between overly harsh restrictions and ineffective leniency. Perhaps the authorities are finally recognizing that gin is too deeply embedded in English life to be simply legislated away. "Will it affect us here?" Anne asks practically. Fraser shakes his head. "Minimally. Our legitimate business is already licensed and compliant, and the smuggling side operates outside legislation regardless." The conversation continues, touching on business prospects, local developments, and occasional news from London. It's comfortable, this new life you've built, still connected to gin, but no longer defined by desperation. Later, in the quiet of evening with Bristol's harbour sounds drifting through the window, you reflect on the strange path that brought you here, from St Giles gin cellar to respectable Bristol distiller and smuggler's associate, from widow struggling for daily survival to businesswoman with prospects and plans. And always, at the centre of it all, gin, Madame Geneva, mother's ruin, the spirit that gripped a nation and shaped countless lives, including your own. In London, it was a devil driving people to destruction. In Bristol, perhaps, it can be something less malevolent, still potent, still potentially harmful, but contained within structures that limit its worst effects. Your own relationship with gin has transformed as well. No longer merely a commodity to sell for survival, it's become a craft, something made with care and knowledge. The gin you produce now is clean, properly distilled, flavoured with actual juniper rather than turpentine or other poisons. It can still intoxicate, still offer temporary escape, but without the immediate physical dangers of London's adulterated spirits. As you prepare for sleep in your comfortable bed, so different from the thin straw mattress of your St Giles days, you consider what Mrs. Cooper said in your final conversation. Find something better, she urged, and in many ways you have. Not perfect, not without risk or moral complexity, but better, more secure, more sustainable, more balanced. A life where gin is part of your story, but not its desperate centre. Bristol sleeps around you, its rhythms different from London's perpetual activity. The harbour quiets as ships settle for the night, the last taverns close their doors, and even the smugglers complete their secretive work until tomorrow. In this quiet moment between wakefulness and dreams, you find yourself grateful for the journey that brought you here, difficult as it was. London's gin-soaked streets seem increasingly distant, like scenes from someone else's life rather than your own recent past. Your eyes grow heavy as Bristol's gentle sounds blend with your own steady breathing. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges and opportunities. Mrs. Hodgson's tea room to supply, cordials to prepare, Fraser's imports to process. But tonight, in this moment of peaceful transition, you can appreciate how far you've come from those desperate days selling penny glasses in St Giles. The gin craze continues in London, no doubt, Madame Geneva still ruling the capital's poorest neighbourhoods with her harsh embrace. But here in Bristol, you've found a different relationship with the spirit that shaped your fate, a way to work with it rather than being consumed by it. As sleep approaches, you let go of London's ghosts. Mrs. Cooper's rattling cough, the constable's heavy footsteps, the desperate faces of gin-soaked St. Giles. They fade like mist, replaced by Bristol's possibilities, by Anne's steady partnership, by the business you're building day by day. Your last thought before dreams claim you is that survival alone is no longer your goal. Here, in this new place with its different relationship to the spirit that nearly destroyed you, perhaps you can find not just existence, but something approaching contentment. And as you drift into sleep, far from the gin-crazed streets of Georgian London, your breathing deepens, your mind quiets, and Bristol's gentle harbour sounds carry you into dreams of possibility rather than mere survival.